The following is a conversation with Dr. Mike Treanor, professor of computer science, an expert in artificial intelligence, game design, an artist, and a good friend. If you enjoy this conversation, please subscribe, share, and like. And if you really enjoyed it, there is a Patreon link in the description. Hey, Mike, good to see you. Long time no see.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to participate in a podcast. This is like a free-form conversation. We could talk about whatever we want. But since you're an expert on AI, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the current situation? Are you excited? Are you scared? Are you indifferent to the AI revolution?
Yes, certainly not indifferent. I'm excited. There is a great sense of uneasiness that's been there since the very start. But yeah, obviously I'm excited because even in my own life, it's taking away a lot of BS work, right? So like LLMs make it so stuff that you used to have to use your brain on, you don't have to anymore. And that's great. Now that stuff is arguably not worthy of human attention to begin with, which bureaucratic forms and that sort of thing. Now the thing, I don't know if I want to launch into it, but I have hesitation and concern. Because I usually do whenever there is a big gold rush around technology, and this one feels even bigger. Probably, definitely the biggest one in my lifetime. Is that I feel like there maybe some people are missing the point. Like there's maybe too much excitement, and people are kind of forgetting what's important about life, and I particularly in the creative areas. People start to think like, oh, you don't need painters anymore. You don't need poets anymore. You don't need design anymore. And it's like, well, wait, so why are we making this stuff at all to begin with? Why were people ever making it if suddenly, because it's easier to make, you don't need the creative aspect anymore? Anyway, there's a lot in there, but that makes me concerned because I hear a lot of excitement and maybe naive optimism or naive kind of being overly excited about the technical progress while not critical enough, not having a mature perspective on art and meaning making and why humans do things and what we're all doing here on this planet, right?
Yeah, you know Kurt Vonnegut he's one of my favorite American writers, and in one of the books, I don't remember which one, he writes that the only meaning of life is the creation of art. There is no other meaning in the postmodern world other than creation of art, because creation of art is the creation of meaning and purpose. I like it. I think it's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but it speaks to this fear among artists and among actually everybody, but especially artists. What will AI do to them? I slightly disagree with you in a sense that I really worry. I'm not like overhyped about this aspect. I'm actually worried about it. And what I mean by it is that yes, people will still create art as people are still playing chess, right? We have still chess competitions, even though there is no ever any chance that we will win with a computer. So computers will forever win chess games, right?
Yeah.
I think the same might happen with AI. It will be that we will be still creating paintings, movies, novels, but we will never be able to match the level, quality of the art created by AI. And if that happened in the near future, one day it might happen, but I think it will happen in the near future, like 10 years maximum. First of all, how do you ever make any money? Is it only a hobby from then on, right? And second, like, how do you find the meaning in life if creation is no longer appreciated? It will be like, naive art in paintings. Like there is this movement of naive art. There are people who are never educated in art, and they paint, and then we buy their paintings, and they will say like, "This is amazing, such a beautiful naive art painting," knowing very well, even in the name, that it's a naive version of the high art, right? So that I worry we will all become a naive art creators.
Yes. Okay. So how do you make money, and is it all going to be hobby? And maybe you won't make money, and yes, maybe it'll all be a hobby. So that's one starting point, and that I'm kind of okay with. But the thing that I'm concerned about is this knife art. Knife art, as in like an artist would like kill it, or they make it with knives.
No, sorry, my pronunciation is naive.
Naive art. Got it. Yeah, that's okay. Sure. I love that. Okay, yeah. Maybe like I can imagine like an artist making something and slashing it. It's a knife art. It's garbage. But no, that's not what we're talking about. There's a metaphor that I've been kicking around in my head, or maybe a framing of thinking about like what the point of all this is now that AI can maybe outperform real musicians or artists or poets, or which I don't think is necessarily true, because what does that mean to outperform? I think that question is part of the problem, the idea that there is some sort of notion of progress with regard to these activities. But so anyway, the framing is based on my own personal experience. I was very into a local band in Santa Cruz called Slow Gherkin, by the way. And I used to go to their concerts. I used to feel really good about the fact that I was into them and they were local. I liked the idea that maybe the people at school didn't like them as much, so I felt special for liking them. I liked their energy as they performed. And there's all this stuff. And note how I didn't, at least I don't think I mentioned their music yet, right? That they were making, right? Now they made good music too. I still think they're good, but or their old music is good. So I think there's a social function, right? Like it's basically the thing that matters about all this stuff is social, and it's all context. And if we want to talk about like bad art, the epitome of bad art in a way is going to like art and wine festivals and stuff. And that's people, they pay for a booth and maybe you buy it and you hang it in your house. I don't know if I have any, but my mom gave me some of her findings at art and wine festivals. And it's this like weird, ugly ceramic fish, and it's just there. And it's from California. My mom is there. And I think about my mom. I think about the weird person who thinks they're going to make money selling ceramic fish at a festival. And they did make a little bit of my mom's money. And so all the meaning making, I think, is what's important. And of course, the actual ceramic fish itself matters. It's not like it doesn't matter. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think to sum it all up, I think there's a false narrative of progress with creative activity. And that humans are what matter ultimately, always, right? And maybe this is going to help focus that, right? This is going to help focus this AI revolution is going to help people think of it that way. That said, in art schools and stuff, this is what they've been talking about the whole time, right? Is the social function of art.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
So
it's hard to disagree with that.
This is true, and it will function this way. By the way, there's just a tangent. This cup, because you mentioned the fish, this cup is made by a Polish amateur a cup maker, whatever is the correct term, in a biking festival, which I went to. And it was so funny because they were making these cups, and like putting all these patterns on it. And I was buying it, I completely unaware of the patterns and what it is. And then next in line was a guy who started to discuss these patterns with the pottery maker. And they were like, this pattern is not really 12th century, this mid 13th century, and you are making a mistake. This is unauthentic. And the pottery maker took out an archaeology book and shows, no, I'm exactly right. The dating on this pattern is from this era, and this is how it should be. And they had like a half an hour discussion about authenticity of already authentic pottery. It was so cool, right?
Yeah.
It was so cool. So that will stay, right? That element of authenticity, of aura, how the Walter Benjamin tried to call it, right?
Yeah.
I agree. I worry more about the economics,
Sure.
Like there is an entire industries will fall. Like how Hollywood is going to survive, or how Hollywood artists at least would survive, because everything will be digital. We have digital celebrities, right? Like, or maybe we will not. Maybe it will have to be a real person, or else you are not going to a movie as a form of rebellion, So
yeah, I don't want to sound unsympathetic. I think maybe I did to the idea that industries are going to be hurt by this and real people will be hurt. And I came up as someone who was very interested in weird art and weird music. And then at one point I was like, well, I want to make music. That's what I want to do. And then it's like, well, obviously you can't make music, right? Like no one makes music. Like you don't make money making weird experimental music. And so that was something that just had to be understood by me as a young man. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to make weird video games. And because that's at least computers. And then it's like, well, how are you going to make money with that? And then ultimately you're making compromise after compromise after compromise. And now I'm somehow a computer science professor, never part of my goals or interests. It was always just being like, okay, how can I keep my passion for things that interest me alive while making money and respecting the world as it actually exists, which is musicians. Everyone's a musician, everyone's a poet, everyone's all these things. So you don't deserve, the world doesn't owe you the right to make money in those areas. It sounds super cold. And then what do you do about the existing people? I do acknowledge that they're having kind of the rug pulled out from under them. Yeah, and that sucks, right? And I don't necessarily know what to do about that. But yeah.
Well, one potential caveat is that the people whose rug will be taken from under them are the famous artists. The local artists who play in a local bar will continue playing in a local bar with exactly the same no money.
Which is, 99.999% of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so from this sense, but there is a story by Stanislav Lem, science fiction story,
Okay.
which I love. I like anything by Stanislav Lem, but it talks about it, and it's in 1970s he wrote it. It's amazing how he can predict stuff. So the story is about two engineers who built a robot who can create poetry. And initially, so it's basically they built the GTP, ChatGTP. And the initial reaction of the world is that the poets laugh at this robot because they are better, right? So they go and they have a robot versus human competition on poetry, and poets are better. But over time, very quickly, the robot becomes better and better and better. So first, the poets try to destroy it, okay? Then they actually submit to the art because they are the lovers of poetry, and they cannot stand that the robot is better, but they also cannot stand the fact that the poetry is so amazing, and they would destroy it by destroying the robot, right? So the AI takes over the art of creation of poetry forever. And it is 1970s when he wrote it. It's kind of so I think, and then many of these poets commit suicide. It's a story. He always writes in a sarcastic way, so he's making fun of them. It's not sad, even though they're committing suicide, but it's like in a joking way. But I think we're facing it at least to a degree, because there's some element of human dignity and pride in creating the best, right? The best, the most amazing. So all this social context, I agree, but you want to be like the best, the most popular. So this is a drive, right?
Yeah, but then I think it's not easy, but we get to shape what best means. So, I mean, obviously there's the painting parallels, right? We get like the hyper realism. Eventually things look more real and interesting than reality. And then we had to do something, right? Like art had to do something to evolve. In music, the history of jazz, eventually you are, let's say, jazz goes from like written orchestral music, a little more free, a little more improvisational. Eventually you have free jazz, which in certain areas, it's like, this is the best stuff going on, right? Music that's like falling apart, again on jazz, right? Like Mingus's whole thing is that it's about falling apart, like about to completely fall apart, but it doesn't fall apart. The only reason why that's interesting is because we have an idea of what we were expecting was perfect. And so I guess it's like this imperfection thing, and playing with all that is always going to be something. And you want to be like, oh, that person's a genius. Like that's what you want to be able to do. And I personally don't have that feeling about LLMs, right? I'm not like, or various statistically based generative AI.
So you think that the people and the context will decide the value of art more than some kind of objective hierarchy, and you don't think there is an objective hierarchy, yeah?
I mean, I think there is, but it's already been past the objective hierarchy, right? We've already,
or maybe it's changing, right? Because we initially were trying to get the most realistic art, right?
Yeah.
That was the objective. Like if you were like the best in representing a portrait of a person, you were the best artist, especially if you could represent the intricacies of the character, something like Mona Lisa, right? Something like this. But then we got photography, so technology killed that, right? And then we went to Impressionism, Expressionism. So maybe something like this will happen. Yeah. Well, I think it's true. I just really worry that everybody will be like Van Gogh, poor artist, not like a. Do I worry that Taylor Swift would have less money? Let me think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but people like talking about Taylor Swift, right?
That is rare.
That's like part of it. No, people want to talk about Taylor Swift, the artist, right? Not because of the music. I mean, the music matters, but like it's a whole phenomenon, right? Like Taylor Swift is the Michael Jackson of the early 90s, right? Like everyone, it's like something we can all connect to. And that is the meaning of that music, is that it is an icon we can all share. And it all comes down to, here's the other thing, like art is about communication. And if you have something that can't communicate or isn't communicating anything, it's not interesting, which kind of gets to some other big questions about AI. But like that struggle to communicate, and I don't mean like communicating like something very tangible or like a sentence, like but that's what's interesting in a lot of ways, is that someone's trying to do something and you're trying to understand it. You probably have completely different ideas, right? I don't think that transfer obviously happens from creator to audience member, but I think that struggle is like the pleasure and the interest of art and the value in a lot of ways. Now, an AI could, as a particular artwork, I could very much imagine an AI that's trying to do that, right? Heck, I've even worked on projects where the AI is trying to communicate, represent something to people. But then the way I think about those projects are that is actually all still about me, and as a person who created, and my collaborators, and are what it meant for us to create a generative system that was trying to represent something.
Do you think that art communicates differently depending on the medium? So what I mean by that, if you look at the Impressionist painting, you see something like, let's say, some landscape there, and the way it is created, it's to create a specific emotion in you, and that is indirect, but still a very specific message, right? I want you to feel, or you will feel that, and then you add on top of it. But it's rare that you would add something opposite, right? If the painting has a mood of sadness and melancholia, and you come at it, I look at it, and you say like, oh, it is so funny, it makes me feel funny, right? That's rare, because the communication is quite straightforward, even if indirect. But there is other forms like music, when I think we are always over-interpreting what we are listening to. Like when I listen to music, it much more depends on my mood and my context, what it means, than on the intention of a person. So I might listen to a song, especially in classical music, right, which is supposed to be, but it's like Mahler, Fifth Symphony based on gypsies, traditional wedding. I don't have this context.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to it and I think like, oh, it's a cool tune. I like it. I don't read the message, which was supposedly put there.
Yeah. So it's okay. So we absolutely do different medium communicate differently. And I don't even necessarily mean about like message transference, like the idea that a creator has a specific thing in mind and is received by someone else. That's not how that works at all. You can hope for enough shared context between the creator and the audience where you might be sharing something. I think that basically the reception of art is very culturally and socially determined. I think it's also really important for artists to be thinking about that when they create things, if they have a hope, if they do want to communicate something. But anything that can be communicated, like a specific thing that can be communicated, is probably not worth communicating via art, right? Like that's a big lesson of my very esoteric career of kind of art games that try to represent little ideas through little metaphors. Basically, there's a great essay by someone called Fuck Video Games, where they basically said that they were trying to make a game representing how they felt when they broke up with their girlfriend or something, and they were struggling and struggling, and then they realized all I'm communicating is this made me sad, which, like, who cares, right? And so there's basically a rejection of this whole idea that games should represent messages through, which, by the way, I don't even know if it's worth talking about anymore, but that about over 10, 15 years ago, were you around that, that sphere? In certain areas of independent games and academia, that was an idea. And it still is there. It's not that games can't represent things specifically, but
it looks like every art form goes through this period, right?
probably.
Yeah. It first it copies the previous art form, then it tries to create their own message, and then they deconstruct it and destroy it, right? Like abstract expression is destroyed. The realism was like, let's create a new art form. Then impressionism, let's say, it's like experiment with it and then destroy it by abstract expressions when you're putting your unconscious thoughts without any conscious message. It's kind of like the medium is a message, McLuhan idea. But I think there is space for both. So I am not, I do not submit to any interpretation or ideology which is currently popular. I'm totally fine looking at the realist paintings, impressionist and abstract art, as long as I like it for some reason. But I'm, you seem to be more like the past is rejected. We should now not create the message. That doesn't matter.
No, that's not it at all. No, I am major egoist, like obsessed with my own I think the creator matters very much. I don't think objectively they matter. What I'm saying is I don't think materially there's any way that my intent is actually going to manifest unless it happens to, right? In the participant, which they need to arrive at on their own. So I'm not against that. I think a lot of my research is all about trying to explore how creators can better understand using games to represent interesting ideas.
But you did say that the message is almost not worth talking about. It's not worth passing to if it's a direct message, right? You think
if it's a direct message, but it's rare that it is a direct message, right? Like a film, for instance, you might have themes you're interested in making, but there's all sorts of stuff. You have your music, you have the way that the people look, the way that we relate to a certain like smirk someone makes, and all of that is not part of your little message of the theme, right? It's a different thing, which is hard to articulate, right?
Yeah, but it's still indirect message, right? Like, for example, when people do activist documentaries, they are specifically trying to say something, right? They are not only trying to say it clearly, but they are trying to convince you that they are right. Yeah, so maybe that's not art then. Maybe it's other art. Maybe
that's questionable, and also questionable like morally, right? You have something you're trying to communicate, and you're trying to sweep in people's emotions to trick them to get over why they don't already think the thing you're trying to tell them, or maybe just to reinforce it, to be more generous to them. It's like, oh, I've now convinced you that this issue is important, and all this music and the way I selectively chose some stories and not others now makes you feel very firmly grounded.
When you go to museum and you see an artist statement, do you read it or you ignore it? This is
artist statement.
Yeah.
It depends. I'll read it. Yeah.
Do you think it's because when I came here like 20 years ago to Canada, I was traditionally brought up in Poland. It's like a little bit behind in like always 20 years behind. So for example, I listened to a 1960s, 70s music, right? And then maybe 1990s, which I love. I love the fact that we are a little bit behind. Yeah. We are no longer, we are now cutting edge, but we were, and what I mean is like for me, reading an artist's statement by a piece of art was like kind of weird and funny because I was like, you are explaining to me what you try to do in this. First of all, well, it might be interesting as an additional context. Like you look at a sculpture and then you would like to know when it was created, who was the artist, what was his life. But independently, I can just look at the sculpture and appreciate it, right? And I always looked at art this way. It was always me interpreting the the art without the context. And I found it like kind of ridiculous, especially for, the famous banana on a wall, $6 million banana on a wall, right? Without context, it's a banana on a wall.
But we live in the time that happened is another thing. Like that's maybe part of it, is a lot of art is in museums because of context that we don't have, right? And arguably maybe not worth talking about unless you have the time to understand the context, right? Yeah. And it was selected because of the context that the curators have.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was something I struggled with a long time ago. How come this thing gets to be in the museum, but this other thing doesn't get to be in the museum? And it's like, well, it's because the museum is a particular institution run by a particular class of people educated in a certain way, and they own it. And this is just what they chose. And they know a lot that I don't know. And so if I think this comic book is really special or something, they probably don't understand. It's not that I'm wrong necessarily. I probably have less interesting to say, at least the young me I'm talking about, than they have to say about whatever weird garbage in the museum, right? And by garbage, I mean literally like some like art garbage put there for you to reflect on.
And what happened with it is that it went to extreme in some fields, right? I totally get that if you listen to Beethoven over and over, you get bored, and then you have like, aharmonic music to make it more interesting in 1920s, 30s, right? But what happened is like literally every established classical musician I know is only interested in this aharmonic music. And then they go to I have a friend in California who's amazing, but his art is to take a piano, put the water in it, take a hammer and hit the strings.
People love
and destroy something, right?
Yeah.
It's cool performance.
One of my best musician friends growing up just got obsessed with pianos. So I lost track with him musically at a certain point because he was getting so weird. And then he stopped on just like, you can just stick all this stuff in pianos. And it's like, oh, I got a new album. It's like, it's him banging on an album or a piano for 70 minutes. Anyway, I'm very sympathetic. Like I said, core to me is that basically I self-identified because I wanted to be different with jazz very young. And then I just listened to the history of jazz, like starting from the beginning and then until it went crazy. And then when it became pop again, right? And so I'm like the whole thing. Like, and I actually probably live over in what most people consider bad music, which is something you might call smooth jazz. But I think peak was sometime in the 80s. I think jazz kind of hit its thing, but it went through the entire thing to full insanity, and then boom, comes back to, rock beats and nice smooth music.
So maybe it's good to be not too sophisticated, like I like the fact that I can listen to Rachmaninoff and love it and not necessarily love Stravinsky, right? I just like the fact that I can enjoy what normal people without acquired taste and sophistication and elitism enjoy it. Right?
Sometimes I give a metaphor to students about why we talk about theory stuff. Tell me if you relate with this when you're trying to talk to students who maybe don't care about theoretical stuff at all and they just want to make stuff. I think, imagine your brain is one like single blob that has no differentiation in it whatsoever. And you're saying, I like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? And that's what you like. And I want to make things like that. And then we read and we experience weird stuff, and it's like kind of carving out it's like just mapping the space. Your brain gets just more differentiation. It's not that you need to hang out with the weird art films that make you feel terrible and think that that's the only good music or good film there are. It's not that you can't like Marvel. It's just like I think it's good to explore the whole space. And then as a creator and someone receiving stuff, you can just kind of appreciate more with the more nuance, right?
Yes, that's true. If you're stuck in the Marvel universe, and feel very sorry for you. Sorry, all the Marvel. I just lost half of the audience. That's okay.
Yeah.
No, but you know what I noticed? I went through this process, right? So initially I was watching like some Star Wars films, right? When I was a kid. Then when I was a teenager, I started to watch like really weird artsy films like Requiem for a Dream, but Aronofsky is like, it's just a nightmare to watch for a teenager.
Yeah.
And, and then all these films, and then maybe Tarkovsky. I never really appreciated Tarkovsky as people, love him. I like some of his movies because it's too sophisticated for me. But then I went like up. Now, in my 40s, I like it. I watch it. But I also like a stupid comedy,
Yeah.
a TV series, which is absolutely, I know exactly what will happen next. It's obvious. It's just fun. It's just fun. Relax and stop being.
I'm 100%. Sometimes I say like, heck, I'm a video game professor. I mean, I'm obviously not a snob about everything. I do think it's important to experience. My teenage thing was all the David Lynch stuff, which is so important to me. And R.I.P. David Lynch. That was complete. In fact, I always say that's what's got me into my career at all, is like, where are the David Lynch like video games, right? Now I'm like, I wouldn't want to play those, but and people have, and Twin Peaks is a huge touchstone for so many people, that there are games that try to mimic it, which I think is arguably different than what I was talking about. But anyway,
do you think that that this is because you said something interesting about being a professor of games?
Yeah,
you basically presume that being professor of games is like being with the people. You are not a professor of classical literature, right?
Yeah, the people's professor.
Do you really think we are still there, or do you think that soon we will not? I already see like a little bit of it. So if you don't know the newest awkward game which nobody played, and you haven't played it, that you are not worthy. And if you play Call of Duty, then you are out. Right? You know what I mean? It's like there is already element of elitism. Like in every art, it started as a people's thing, like opera. Started as people's thing. Now to opera you go if you're like PhD level or something, right? It was people's thing. It was street people's thing, right?
Yeah.
The games are like were like this too, and then they become like more and more elitist, small elitist, and they're like now really there.
Not really, though.
Not yet.
No. And I think. So it used to be very, very important to me, and I still care about it, but about trying to elevate that, like elevate game, not necessarily their status culturally, but just elevate what people are even trying to do. And then I started to understand more nuance I didn't see before in, I guess, craft of game design, which maybe I didn't quite appreciate at the start of my journey of trying to take games seriously professionally, where there is a lot of really impressive craft that goes into some of these like dumb, low art games. So it's like it was already there, I guess. The thing that was important about games was already there. The problem with games is okay, on the one hand, I think the craft of game design super important, and there's a lot to talk about. Even the most abstract, boring games we take for granted, like solitaire, I think are great things to talk about. On the other hand, games are dumb. So many are dumb, like really exceptionally dumb, not thoughtful like a teenager would be thoughtful. And some games, right? And so I think the problem with game academia or people who try to speak up for games is they're not willing to really own the fact that games are judge-worthy and not even condemnable. It's like imagine if you only lived in the Saw movies. Like every day you just wake up and start watching a movie like Saw
or Marvel.
Maybe Marvel. At least there's humor, or I don't know. Like there's a little more going on in the Marvel movies.
I have never seen Saw movies, so I know what it is. But
yeah, I've seen one of them, but they're awful, right? But that said, it's okay to let your brain go down some awful trash thing every now and then. And so games are complicated because they're kind of both, and not to mention the fact that it's bringing together all the visual media and audio and narrative and it's interactivity. All this stuff is coming together, and it's just a big mess that is fun to work in, honestly, right? Because it is such a mess. There's so much. I feel like there's opportunity with games, but anyway.
So we are not yet there, but you think we will not get there? That the games will be like films, that there will be like this elite level games, and then the rest plays the simple games, which we don't talk about. You don't think we'll get there?
Yeah, there's so many hurdles. Like I've been pretty. Sometimes I think, in the same way you can see we're picking on Marvel things. Let's say lovingly. I don't know if it's lovingly, but what's it called if you just feel kind of like?
Oh, I
sure.
watched all of them. I just think they're
Yeah, I
stupid.
feel sure about it.
But
No, I don't want to say bad. But I'm not going to say good either. Just sure. That's how I feel about Marvel. Oh no, I lost my train of thought. Trying to defend Marvel movies. I lost my train of thought.
well, we were discussing whether.
What would an adult film, sorry, movies made for adults, be? You know what they are when you see them, right? When you see a movie, like, okay, yeah, this is a grown-up thing. And then what are those of games, right? And then people point at things where people are moved by them. And I'm not I don't want to take away people's feeling emotional about a game they played or whatever, but it's like, I don't know. I can still point to a lot of things. You're still controlling a little cartoon jumping around the screen at the end of the day, or you're still ignoring what you're doing for 90% of the game, which is mashing a button and like blowing people up or something, right? Like, so there's some aspects of it that feel adult because people feel emotional about it. But I still think it's a challenge. There are very few games that feel like they're this like cohesive, and I think that's going to be what it takes to be what you're talking about, where there are the games that are hoity-toity or that are, and I don't have an answer. And also, by the way, of course, there are exceptions to this. And if I could think of one in a second, every example I keep trying to explain away, that is not hitting the mark for me of an adult game.
I kind of know what you mean because we have this problem in immersive media, which I'm working on.
Yeah.
Every year it is slightly better when I go to like a Venice Film Festival or even Cannes now is doing it, but it's not yet there. It's not yet there. And in games, I think maybe the problem is the competition between fun of playing and engagement of playing and the sophistication of the context which you would like to put there. It's always like on top of it. You can't like ignore it. You could give that game to a 5-year-old who will completely not understand and enjoy it. You cannot give a 5-year-old a film which has multi-layered meaning in it, and he will not enjoy it, right?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to what happens when you're playing games is they are interactive, so people have to do something. And so what are the things that people do? Now this gets to my whole research agenda. What are the things that people do when they play games? They control a little person walking around a 3D simulated space. That's one thing that they do. So that's already, I don't know how deep or interesting is that. I don't know, it could be, right? Moving something around space. You could do environmental storytelling. So you could make a game about walking around and seeing things. And heck, a lot of people have. They have the walking simulator genre, which is all about people trying to make games that are just about walking around. They aim a cursor at things. So imagine the center of the screen is a dot, and then you're kind of trying to click when the dot hits there. That's what all shooting games are, right? And so it's just, I think, it's always been my story that, what are the other interesting things that we can have people thinking about doing while they're playing games? And I think game industry is very, very conservative at experimenting with what those things are. And it's basically about physics simulation and branching dialogue trees, maybe. That would like sum up 99%
for many realism of the rendering, right?
In rendering, of course, yeah. But I've always been one to.
Well, maybe we're waiting for a genius of game design still. Maybe this Leonardo da Vinci had not yet come, and maybe the AI will allow it because, like movies, creating games is extremely expensive, and it's getting cheaper with AI, but it's still very extremely expensive and. There is millions of people who might have an amazing idea which will never be made. So maybe that's the time when we can like instruct an AI to build an entire game based on very detailed prompt that might bring about very interesting games, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, games are really hard to make. So that's part of the problem, right? Games are very, very hard to make. So it might make it easier for other people to make games. I'm hesitant to give credit to the code generation. I would love to talk about that more. I did play with Cursor quite a bit, which is...
But you basically still deny the reality of the fact that the LLMs will be so good, I think, that they will be way better than any best coder ever, right? Like you think it is not the case.
Well, again, what does good mean in this
Well, in
case?
code, you can define it, right? So
Sure. Oh, you mean better coders?
yeah. So example,
Sure.
better coders, so
Yeah.
you can.
I don't deny that code generation is going to be huge. Right?
Yeah, what I mean is when you create a game, right? Like right now, what I have to do, I have to learn some engine. Like I use Unity, right? Game engine. I need to know C# well. After a few years, I'm getting the good ideas, what is optimized, what is not. It still takes so much time and so much effort to get relatively small game, right?
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Imagine that there is a game designer whose only role is to design the gameplay itself, to balance it, but everything else is automatically made and you controllable. So the AI shows you the result and you're like, no, like this is this artistic effect here. It's like conversation with a game artist rather than, then what I mean, it would potentially democratize the game design.
So one, maybe it's going to be better, but none of that's new, what you just described, like the field of like game generation and procedural content generation and this kind of mixed initiative they call tools where you have the human and the tool go back and forth. I think that can be very powerful and interesting. But then pretty quickly you get to the problem of if it's so easy to make things, then suddenly who cares about the things that were made, right? Like, it's like we don't need more games necessarily, right? In fact, I'm guilty of this. Like, I've been living in emulation space for a while now and playing it's like nothing but old games. It's like I don't know if I think they might have solved snowboarding games 20 years ago. I think that was pretty much it. I don't know. Like, so if I want to play snowboarding games, I can just go back. Racing games, kind of similar. What am I trying to say? So no, we don't need more games unless it's how they look, maybe. And their game design sensibility is changing too. They're more friendly now than they used to be. Games are, but
I just mean like democratization aspect. So look, like right now, how many people can afford making games? Well, first of all, living in the West, maybe in some countries who invest in games. So this is like from 7 billion people who would have an idea, who play computer games, let's say 6 billion plays computer games, then you have a tiny minority who can ever put their creative powers into the game. If we had AIs which help you to do it quite high quality on whatever you want to do, and that the same thing will apply to films, then it's only a question of your creativity and your idea. It's no longer a question of resources. So it's full democratization of access, right? I assume that this is the science fiction world we're living in 10 years.
Yeah.
When you just say and it happens, right? Like magical words.
Yeah.
That might bring about amazing games and art and everything, right? That might be the other side of the coin.
Maybe. Yeah, I know, maybe like it might. And then I guess do you think the person who generated that prompt was pretty cool, I guess, right? Yeah, and it's a matter of like, what are you trying to do with the stuff you're creating? Are you just trying to, this is the other thing about, I don't want to launch into an AI, like ideological divide between, what's the point of the AI that you're doing? Are you just trying to entertain people? Like, are you just trying to make people engaged? Or are you trying to solve a problem, like a defined problem, right? And if that's what you're trying to do, you're probably going to do it with this technology. That's been happening, right? Then I guess I'm just doing that stupid artist move where it's like, we're not solving problems, we're making them, right? Like and I just think that that's important not to lose sight of a little bit. Like, I don't know what that would mean exactly to be like, okay, this AI that I told it, basically I gave it a goal, and fast forward 5-10 years. I want to make a game that is kind of action based, but I don't want it to be like any game I've seen before. And I want it to, I don't even know what you would say in this prompt. And then it goes, and I say, not like this, like that one. And then eventually I get this game. Like, wow, that's awesome. And then I release it, I guess. I guess if it's that easy, everyone's going to be doing that.
Yeah, I mean that you're right. But I mean that there will be this one person, this 2 people, this 10 people in the world who would never have made these games, but now can make them. And these games could be the most wonderful pieces of art.
Well, that also happened recently. I mean, it's maybe it's like a asymptote thing, but when I started making games, it was really hard. But guess what? It was a lot easier than it was 10 years before that. When my students are learning to make games, it's a lot easier right now. And I'm not saying that as a snob, I'm just saying the tools are way better, right? And so, but this recent bump in tools brought about that whole walking simulator genre, as I understand it. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the games where you just walk around and so the whole shift, and actually credit tools and this shift in the types of independent games that were being made. For a while there, it was all about game mechanic experimentation. And then people started rebelling, and I'm from that generation, and people started rebelling against that. And hey, look, we have these tools. Screw your game mechanics. Like, I don't care about game mechanics. I can download I can just drop a first person controller in here and start placing 3D assets around, and I can represent stuff about my identity and my history. And so people started making all these games that weren't able to before, right? And the games looked very different, and that's your point. But it's going to be like another level of that.
Yeah, but it's significantly other because, we teach game development, and we know that, yes, it is incomparably easier. When I wrote my first game, it was actually quite broken when I was like 14 in Pascal. It took me 8,000 lines to create something like very, very not working clone of Dune 2.
Yeah.
That was my like goal. It was happening in Middle Ages. It was called Castles. I lost the disc.
Say Doom 2?
Dune.
Dune.
2. Yeah.
Like the
RTS.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it was basically clone of.
It's impressive though. You were working on an RTS-ish thing.
Well, you need to see it. It was really bad. It was really bad. It was procedurally programmed, in Pascal, not objects. But I was, it was so hard. And then Unity came about, and other games engine, and it became easier. But it's not easy. It's not easy. Yeah. We know from our students, right? Like, they have a semester of creating games, and in one semester they can accomplish maybe a prototype if they work in a group, use a lot of resources from asset stores. That's what you can maybe get in one. What I mean is, like, it's like magic, right? It will be like magic. You will just say, you will have a conversation with AI for 5 days, and if your idea is amazing and you can describe it and you can iterate over this idea with AI, that might bring about games we cannot dream about, like things which we never thought about are.
I think that's possible. Yes. It's funny. I do find increasingly, and again, this is such an I TA'd in grad school in film programs, and I remember that the film classes were never what the students wanted for most of them, right? Because they're all like about problematizing film, right? And they're studying film because they love film, and then the classes are all, let's figure out why this thing you love is racist or whatever, right? Would be the point of the class. So anyway, I remember these people, the professors, and I remember I was kind of responsible for holding that line because I was the TA. I'm becoming that for games, not necessarily about like cultural issues, but I find it really hard to teach people what is good. It's starting to be really hard, like to understand, to have taste in why something would be better than something else. It's starting to be a challenge that I'm finding much more difficult than teaching people how to make the games, which is maybe just based on time. So I wonder if that'll still be a problem. And then if you remove that, like, what does it mean to remove taste from the equation? Because the AI tells us what good taste is. It's possible that like it just comes out and it's just perfect, and that is what the world needed. That's what I think is good. Well, I don't know. I think it's still people talking about things, even if it just gets easier, defining what makes good.
Do you think the difficulty comes from the fact that we embraced in academia the postmodern view that there is no such thing as good? I have a feeling, at least in American academia, that there is like, everything is defined in a context. There is no hierarchy. There's no good, bad. It doesn't exist, right? I don't believe that. I'm very traditional. I understand it is dependent on many aspects, but it still exists.
Yeah, it's funny that in this conversation, I sound like I'm coming from I'm influenced, right? I'm from academia, Western academia forever, literally, from age 5. I've been in school. So I've definitely influenced by that kind of thinking and really being sensitive to the idea and all of how things can be culturally defined and being really careful about normative statements like good and bad. And but I think it's usually here's my move, because I am very sympathetic to more traditional ideas that there is good and bad. What I do is I take one step back and I define enough criteria of what I'm talking about before I say that. Right.
So that's your criteria.
And I'd be like, well, and then you want to talk about my criteria. How much time do you have? Right. And that kind of thing then that move has actually served me quite well. Like I do a long with students. I'm because I am this like game mechanic ideologue type person from the 2000s when that was in vogue. I spend a lot of time with strategy games with students because a lot of them haven't played like non-digital strategy games and they don't know how even to think about it. And I don't want to be overly simplistic, and I'm not really, honestly. A lot of students can't see the difference between Chutes and Ladders and take another popular strategy game like Settlers of Catan or something. Like they don't see the difference. And it's like, well, in Chutes and Ladders, you're an activator of the game. Like it's just all that matters. If there's a button which is like run Chutes and Ladders and you held it, that's all you need to do to make Chutes and Ladders go. Where Settlers of Catan, there's like stuff your brain is turning stuff. So usually I'm like, this Chutes and Ladders game is like not good, and then I have to go back and explain, okay, well, now how about this? I'm talking about this one dimension of games which I'm going to call strategy games. Strategy games mean that players have trade-offs and think about dilemmas and all this kind of stuff, and that is enough, right?
Well, but your escape and excuse does not work for postmodern mind, because the postmodern mind will say that your criteria are also meaningless. So you cannot establish the criteria because they are meaningless too, which I completely disagree with, right? Like as much as I disagree with objective, only one type of beauty out there, and that's like Platonic beauty, which emanates from everything from there. I also disagree with this complete nihilistic, there is no good and bad, there is no criteria, there is no hierarchy.
So okay, I spent a lot of time on, so I'm with you on this, to be clear. I think so. I spent a lot of time on game interpretation. So like, what does it mean to interpret game mechanics? And I literally would create these structured like proofs of why we believe a game represents something. I mean, literally like, because I believe this, A and B means I believe C. Because I believe C and A means D. And this and all the way to the top to some conclusion about this game represents that, I'm not going to give an example. But about how games represent things. And the move I made is you can keep going until it just stops being interesting to like talk about the arbitrariness. So I remember one game had to do with like boys and girls, and it was blue and pink. Oh, right. Oh, problematic, right? And it's like, well, I'm going to write this big proof, literally, like it's like a proof that something means something. This game is making statements about men and women. And somewhere down there is like, well, you have to believe blue means man and pink means woman. Like, you can disagree with that. That's not what I'm talking about. And if you want to get into that, that is valid for you to do. But like, if we just can just stop right there with that reasoning and get this conclusion, we can do interesting stuff with it, right? So I guess it's like I'm sensitive to the idea that anything can mean anything, and criteria, this nihilist perspective. I don't know, would people who really ascribe, would they be happy saying nihilist? Postmodern people,
they would hate it, but
okay,
yeah, not it.
Yeah, I don't think that would be the way they would. I'd say if anything, I'm closer. But eventually, it just stops being interesting to keep talking about how things are arbitrary.
Well, it's so self-contradictory, because if you cannot agree to any frame of reference and any hierarchy, then you have no communication. You can't talk about anything. Yeah. You cannot say this is better than this. I specifically use the contiguous word better, right, or good, because I think there must be this, otherwise there is no communication. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I'd say a lot of my language has been tempered and softened by academia, like of being careful about good and better. But you can start to be also like, this choice would be better than that choice. I could tell someone in a game design context, and then it's like, better for what? What do you mean? It's like, well, what are your goals, right? Like, I'm assuming your goals are that you want to create games people want to play and ultimately get a career in this area. If that's your goals, my judgment is that that's better than that. But I'm not like appealing to that there's some objective sense that something is better platonically or something.
Yeah, I think it's a philosophical problem with academia that initially the world was black and white, let's say defined by religion, right? Let's say there was this view. So the rebellion was against this black and white view, and the rebellion went to extreme cases and showed, look, this edge case is not black and white. You can really look at it from two perspectives, and you can. And the next step they made, it's an absurd. It's therefore everything is like it. No, not everything. Not everything. There are things which are obviously wrong and obviously good, and obviously it's like murder. Okay, bad. Okay, can we like more or less agree?
Yeah.
Bad, right?
Yeah, can you
Do we need to
certain
contextualize
sense?
it? You can always find a case when somebody did something like that in a specific situation when it was justifiable, whatever, right? That doesn't override that idea, right?
I wonder if talking about those edge cases though is important, especially for maturing minds, right?
Very important.
Right. And that's, and maybe some of us have been in academia forever and it gets a little like frustrating, but maybe that's why classes emphasize. Maybe that's why there's that emphasis in universities, because it matures your mind to really consider your assumptions.
Yeah, I think it should be done in undergrad, let's say, and then you come back to some kind of reconciliation, but you never go there.
Yeah.
And
but undergrad, come on.
Well, because you say this is another difference.
I was going to say that I think I wouldn't expect any.
Yeah, I know, but look, like people were adults in the past when they were 14. They went to war. Okay, they had children when they were like 20, and so the idea that undergrads are kids, I hate it so much. They're not kids; they're adults.
Yeah,
they should be treated as adults.
And this is a privilege of tenure. It's been my mission to run my classes in a way that treats people as adults. And my metaphor I use is I want to think of myself as your piano teacher, that you've signed up for piano lessons. Is your piano teacher going to sit down and give you a written test and you're going to argue over an 89 or a 90 or on that? And it's like, no, it's kind of up to you, right? And I'm here. And I can play piano way better than you can. Do you want to know what I know? Right? It's kind of how I'm trying to
use the words better. Are you claiming this as an experienced game professor? You know more about games, or you know better things about games than the student who just joined the program? That's so not postmodern.
I think I could probably say more. Yes. I could probably say more. That's, people come out of nowhere though without any formal.
Yeah, but that's the exceptions. That's the exceptions, right? Like there is a genius piano player who at the age of 4 is better than the piano teacher you're talking about. Yeah. It's called Mozart.
Yeah, I wonder how much that no hierarchy thing is really a problem in real life, talking to real people.
Outside of academia?
Well, in academia, I don't encounter it very often.
Or because you're in computer science.
That's true. Yeah, that's yeah. But I hang out. I chill with the literature people, right? That said, we probably don't talk about everything.
I think it's
they're just happy that anyway.
It's getting out of fashion maybe a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And there is historical context for why it was the case. But I think it's a huge problem with academia, and we'll see. The AI will force us to reconcile with tradition, because the only reason we will be teachers, professors, is because we are humans. We will not be the smartest. Mm-hmm. We'll be the average, like way below the knowledge of an AI.
Well, that's a bit. So I have a question for you. What do you think of as your job as a professor?
What is my job?
In education aspect, the educational aspect.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing in that room? What's happening?
It evolves over time. It's really a difficult, complex question. I initially, I teach for 24 years. I started to teach when I was undergrad.
I think, so you also, we both weirdly a lot of it.
So I feel almost, it's half of a job of psychologist and half of a job of, 10% of a job of a parent and 40% of the knowledge, direction of knowledge. So I initially thought like my job is to present that material, check that the people got it, and that's it. And then fairly great, right? Now I think, first of all, I hate grading. I hate the idea of grading, not because I hate the idea of merit. I think merit is absolutely essential. I just hate the idea of grading because grading puts people into a specific way of doing things to achieve that grading goal. Yeah. It's like reinforcement learning in machine learning, right? So I hate grading. If I could be like completely subjective, a dictator, and say like, you put so much effort into it that I don't care you made a mistake there, you get A. And you did nothing. You didn't care. So you get freaking F, even though your stuff is better, right? But I can't do it, so I'm grading. So I think my role is direct people to things they wouldn't otherwise think about, parent them and encourage them to maybe parent is to, what is the word?
Mentor or
mentor them is better. No, condescending. I don't want to be condescending.
Sure. Yeah.
Mentor them to discover things which they don't know about, and I happen to know about. Have a dialogue with them to learn things, because I actually learn a lot from many students. And the other side, it's just a part of it, is to be to deliver the knowledge. It's like and it will be increasingly smallest part over time with AI.
It will be, right? Yeah. Yep.
What about you?
Similar. I mean, I think I always imagine the person in the future looking back on the class, and like I remember I took this class one time where we spent like 6 weeks on the game Breakout. I'm teaching a class on game design right now, and we spent a long time on the game Breakout. And he kept talking about how important like this one physics thing was, but they're not going to remember the physics thing. They are going to remember their sense of who I was. They're going to remember something about the subject. And that's what I mean about I think you're right. Like having their mind go through some pathway they wouldn't have found otherwise. But basically, I just want to do that, and then also model a stance towards the subject. So like, because I think that might stick with people is the way I regard game design, which just is not something I teach either. It's just the way I talk and the way I care about it. And so I have very, very little expectation that students are going to remember anything aside from these like soft social impressions. And maybe that's my own mental problem, because that's how I remember the world, is just people and how the impact they make on me, less than what they say. But anyway, I don't know. I've done ungrading. Do you know this thing where you let students grade themselves? I've done it a few times recently. I'm not going to say it's great, but it's also not worse than trying to grade everybody with numerical things on all their assignments all the time. It's the idea you give feedback and just let students figure out what their grade is on their own.
Well, grading is inherently absurd.
It's stupid
in any creative field, right?
I had someone say
maybe grade math, but
a friend of mine was talking about grading in the arts, and basically everyone gets an A, and if it's a B, it's saying maybe you should consider doing something else. So it's like, and I like the framing of that, because it is so competitive to do anything in the arts, right? To get even forget about making a living, just even for anyone to be talented to do anything. If you're getting a B, it's like, you might want to check something else out. Maybe like take an econ class. I don't know, I don't know.
Another thing I thought, I wonder if you feel like this recently. So because I teach for 20 years, I didn't have this problem before. And I now notice it, at least for 5-6 years, that you have to also encourage students to actually care. Like there is a lot of students who take the class and don't care. And I'm like, why do you take it then? Because you're paying tons of money. This is supposedly your favorite thing to do your whole life, and you're not willing to do anything. So I think the encouragement works. If you're enthusiastic about it, they really like get infected with this enthusiasm, and some of them will be like very interested to pursue it, put more effort.
Yeah.
But there is this problem of motivation for some reason.
It is. And I think it's really hard in small groups, which is something we've both struggled with. But getting people to inspire each other too, and have this kind of, it's not really a competition, but it sort of is in a way. It's not like someone's trying to be better, but everyone inspires each other, and everybody gets, creating that environment is so important. And that enthusiastic environment where everyone's seeing what the other person's doing. And that's the best. I mean, that's where real excellence comes from, but that's hard to achieve with, 4 people or whatever. Well, I forget what I was going to say, but I had another thought about this. Something I think about a lot. It makes sense. It's my job, but
Do you think that, so to conclude that part, do you think that AI, even though it will be knowledgeable and embodied, right? There will be robots and there will be a holographic representation of AI, which are indistinguishable from people, and they can be projected on your retina from a laser projector in the corner of a classroom. So no arguments about like the body language missing in AI. Do you think there will be still a substantial role for a teacher because humans want to be with humans?
Not necessarily, and that'll be interesting. I mean, I believe a huge function of what higher education is just credentialing. It's like sorting for society, of people who can manage to get into college and then manage to convince the school to give them a degree is just a signal. That's a huge portion, I believe, of what we're doing. So the hoop jumping aspect is part of it. So will it matter if those people or the people overseeing that are real humans or not? Yeah, I mean, at some point, remember when online teaching, Coursera and all that, online courses got really popular. Everyone's really afraid, is this whole thing gonna, like, how many blows can higher education take, right? It seems like it survived that one, sort of, right? The online class thing, MOOC. I haven't thought of like that phrase in a while. But will it survive this one? Maybe. I really don't know. I kind of hope so. I was always thinking that, at least for my career, it'd be okay, right? It's like when I had kids. It's like, do I think the world is good for another generation? I think so.
Because you think in human time. You don't take into account that it's potentially exponential. So if there are independent agents working on something, then the 1 minute can mean a year, and 1 year can mean 1,000 years in development.
I wonder, there's that whole argument of once it starts, it won't stop. Is there a good example of agents making progress on something that isn't extremely narrowly defined?
No, agents are very primitive right now, but that's not an argument, because in 19th century we couldn't get to the moon, right? So nobody even thought it would be possible. So it's just a question of how fast it will happen, not whether it will happen, I think.
I know, so you think that this won't cap out? You don't think LLMs are going to...
I am not sure. So, Google had a mathematical proof, let's say, that it will not cap out in terms of the transformer technology, mathematical limit to the ability of learning and pattern matching. But there is another side of this coin, which is data, right? So data, we exhausted the data for training. And what we can now do is to generate data. And the question is, I think it's open, I'm not that much of an expert, but the question is whether the synthetic data on which you train the LLMs is kind of a form of condensed approximation of the previous data. So you never go exponentially forever, or it actually is a new data and you can go exponentially forever. That's the question, and that will be answered very soon. So that's our only hope, or a problem with LLMs for those who are optimistic about them. I would love to have almost everything automated, like all the BS which we have to do. But leave the human superior mind in science creation, so we can do something, have fun still.
Well, I wonder though, if the more progress-oriented thinkers, right? Like, it depends how you situate yourself in history. Are you part of a chain of progress that's going somewhere, or are you just living here and now? In which case, we already are the most important thing. That's kind of how I started. Is AI? I don't think can replace us because it's not possible to, because we are by definition all that matters.
Well, yeah, but most of us. So imagine an evil scenario when billionaires create AI and it takes all the jobs, and they decide like, why are we even feeding these people?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, or AI decides this is inefficient.
Yeah, I think I have a fairly optimistic view of the world and with regard to that. Yeah, you did say evil, so if they're evil, then maybe that could happen. I think evil's pretty rare, and I just don't think that the emergent result of humans existing would create that scenario where people can't get food and shelter. From where we stand now. Obviously, there are places in the world that do not have food and shelter, and they should. Yeah, they're probably going to be greatly helped by these.
Exactly, right? There might be the other side that because labor cost is zero, and then because of fusion maintained by AI, the cost of energy is zero. Then there's abundance of everything, and there is no scarcity, and therefore all the justification for every possible atrocity in history, other than pure psychopathy, when you do evil for evil because you're evil, right? Disappear. Why would you want to kill your neighbor who has something you want when you can have it? Everybody.
Well, I mean, there's ideological reasons, but that would cool down a little bit. Perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah, I think ideological are very often connected to economy. Like all the communist revolution. Yesterday I had an interview with Bill Gentile about revolution in Nicaragua, and I was thinking about it during this interview that all this disaster which happened, which was they were fighting for social justice, and then ended up the guy who did the revolution is now the dictator killing people. Of course, what a surprise. Always happen in history, right? So that would not happen if he didn't want to grab everything he can and others not to have it. Because everybody can have everything then, right?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? I wouldn't be interested in, raids on my neighbors if I have enough food, why would I raid my neighbor?
Yeah.
Castle, right? So.
And it's religion too is another problem. But yeah.
Yeah, but maybe, I mean, yeah, there will always be something, but religion is a form of ideology.
That's what I was based on what I was thinking when I said ideology, but okay. Are you excited? Do you think this AI thing is gonna, I mean, do you just don't know, or do you think it's gonna cap? Or do you think?
I think the
are we going
transform and technology will cap because of data. I think we will have, on the 1st of January 2025, I put like predictions with my friend. We exchanged predictions. So I think there will be absolute, total, unbelievable AI revolution. Robots in every house in 5 years, cleaning dishes. In 10 years, 50% of jobs gone. The only thing is I don't know if it will be good or bad, and I have a slight feeling that will be good. So I'm like 70% it will be good. Transition might be hard, but 70% it will be good because I think everybody will become an aristocracy, meaning people who don't have to work to survive. Everybody, including entire developing country, maybe not in 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20, right? But there will be no scarcity. There will be no. The problem will be the search for purpose and meaning. What is there? Many people will just drag themselves to death out of boredom and do nothing,
which happens.
Which happens always.
Right, yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
Well, I think I'm generally optimistic person. No, but not hugely optimistic. And I think that people are going to make choices to bring this stuff into their life and they're going to spend their money and their time to bring these things into their life or not. I think that we should strive to be conscious about what we're giving up as far as our humanity and things that we find purpose in. But I also think we control what that is to some extent. So you can define what's meaningful in life away from what the AI is doing for you. I guess so. So I'm saying we already struggle with this. Privileged people like myself who've never had to struggle for food or shelter have already been in a meaning search for their life, right? Or trying to find meaning and figure out what is meaningful. I think other human beings are a solid answer for what's meaningful. Like I usually don't get my nihilism basically stops there. I mean that flippantly, nihilism. I don't fully subscribe to any such thought, but people are an end in themselves. I think we should really strive to not lose sight of that as we give up a little bit. But I guess I'm not thinking that there's going to be a huge revolution that sweeps and takes us all by storm. And next thing you know, we're all just like, oh, what happened? Oh, crap. Like I have no meaning in my life anymore. I'm also an academic. I have time to think about things. I have thought about things. So maybe some people are less critical about their consumption of these products that are coming their way than I will be. But for instance, social media, right? Like TikTok and all this stuff has given up a lot of people's humanity in a lot of ways, right? Because it's so addictive. Yeah. And I guess that's been very popular. I like to think that there's going to be, and there already is, a strong movement of people trying to recognize the bad parts of social media and perfectly curated video streams. Yeah.
Well,
like
I worry.
Basically,
I worry about people for whom the meaning of life is work. Because as you said, we're in the privileged situation. Even though I come from very humble beginnings,
I was going to say you're much closer to.
I was in the humble beginnings, but I'm
yeah.
super privileged now.
Yeah.
And what I mean is, like, I don't have any problem. Like if money comes to my account and I can leave, I can find things to do. I will never be bored. There's so much stuff to do, and I love it. And I would like play guitar more and so on. So, but I strongly believe there is a very large portion of society for whom being the person who brings money to family, for example, and that is their, this is their meaning of life. This is like they are that person. Or being a welder, or builder. This is what they love to do. They want to do it. And they don't want to read Nabokov. They are not interested and will never be interested. Yeah. It doesn't matter how many times you try. This old Marxist wrong idea that you can make masses interested in high art. Uh-huh. You can't. They're not literally not interested and will never be. And that's okay, because not everybody have to, right? This is a choice. It should be a choice. So that will be a problem because if people lose the only thing which is really truly meaningful for them, I don't know what they are going to be doing. Another thing is like how people will create relationships and sustain them, right? If nothing is economical, then a lot of relationships is especially in the lower classes, let's say, if you use the Marxist term, is economical in a way. So right, like the man is supporting the family, the woman is working too, and they stay together, they fight and so on, but they stay together because they have to, because otherwise they would not afford the rent. I think there would be like a loneliness epidemic happening for like a lot of social issues around it.
Yeah.
So you are not that worried about.
Well, I guess if it goes, I mean, I've seen it happen in with other educators I know who teach very differently than I do, who have people write essays, and I've talked to them like, you write the essays you're assigning are literally what the current version of ChatGPT is perfect at, right? Like literally just perfect at writing this exact kind of like reflection on what you ate this week kind of essay or whatever it is. And they sit there reading it and they're grading these things. And I'm like, there's no one's writing this. Like, no one is writing these essays. And I do feel sad because this person is older and I don't want them to feel like, I almost don't want them to realize all the way, right? Just stop. Like, just don't even.
Do you think there is no value in writing essays?
I think there's some very nice, well-meaning students who are very respectful of authority and they will listen when you tell them, please don't use ChatGPT. But I think
Is there a value in that exercise? Do you think like it's educational value in the exercise of writing essays?
I do. Yeah.
So we will lose it. So we're losing
I know,
something.
it's terrible. And it's really a shame as an educator. So we're going from your topic. I have sympathy, by the way, for people losing their work that they identify with. Just to end that question, sympathy, if it happens fast, that will be a problem. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
But to education is something I'm more qualified to speak about. Losing essays, I don't have a problem with just pushing on people to get comfortable talking to each other. There is a softness that we've all been trained to teach students with, which I think most people agree maybe has gone too far. Would you agree?
I agree.
Okay. And I say that because I talk to people who I know would not agree with me and they agree with me. So I think almost everyone is maybe afraid to say it. Maybe they're not afraid anymore. I don't know. But the idea is we're professors are afraid of their students and they're afraid to make them do things that make them uncomfortable. I think we need to make students do stuff in front of us more and like just talk the talk. Like, let's get better at talking, get better at programming right in front of me, get better at, and when I've proposed these things before, it's like, oh, what about the students who have more social skills? And it's like, well, hopefully, and we should be very mindful of those who have less social skills, but, it might be a little easier for them, but, we just have to learn, accept the fact that we're going to be helping people get better at their social skills.
That's assuming that the professor has social skills.
Which they don't, because professors are a bunch of weirdos. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Many are really like, especially.
Why are they so strange?
Well, I think it's a training of our neural network, which is affected by what we read. No, I went through the experience like this. So
yeah,
let me tell you an anecdote quickly. I'm talking too much. I know. I'm interviewing you, but I wanted it to be a conversation. So yeah. As a teenager, I was socially cool. Like I was, playing in a band and I was like actor in theater. So I was totally developed socially. I think maybe some would disagree, but I think I was. And then I went to computer science. In the first year of computer science, I went by a bus to my university. And there was a very weird old lady in a bus who was doing these gestures. She was like looking at nothing. And I was, wow, poor lady, she lost her mind. But then I stop on a bus stop at the university. She comes out at the same bus stop. Then she goes to the same building. I found out she was a professor in our department. And that would be the end of the story, but it's not, because 2 years later, I'm taking a neural network class when we learned about multidimensional tensors, right? And I'm going by a bus and I'm like, okay, so this is like a multidimensional matrix, which is like it's going from here. And then you can imagine that it's like coming here. And I'm doing these gestures in the same bus 2 years later after my brain was completely damaged. And I thought like, oh my God, 2 years later, I was normal and now I'm exactly the same. So I was definitely changed. I started to like have problems with communicating because it was boring. It was boring for me to hear what people are saying because they're saying it slowly and I already know what they want to say. It was annoying. It's not like a computer, 1, 2, 2, 2, right? And then I went to study film and fortunately the social awkwardness disappeared and I became normal again, more or less.
Yeah.
So I think that might be the reason why professors are awkward. They go deep into some weird spaces, especially in math.
That could be it. Yeah. That's true. Yes. I don't know if I want to say. I mean, the other thing is professors aren't. It's definitely, it's a brainy job to have, but unless you're at the very top, it's not like a super high paid job in the field. So sometimes I start to think that people have to hire professors and the pool isn't very good.
Of course.
And that's not what people think about it in the world. You think, oh, you're getting the best person in the world. It's like, no, you're getting whoever was willing, who had this credential.
In some fields,
In
you do,
some,
like
sometimes,
theoretical physics,
sometimes,
right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. But you're right. Like what there is the saying which academics hate: if you cannot do, you teach.
Yeah. And then the people who can't, sometimes the people can do, but then it's like, it's not cool to say that teaching matters. You're teaching quality, right? So at various like large R1 institutions, you get people, it's like, oh, this person discovered an atom, and they're not, like, who cares how they teach? It's like, well, I don't know, maybe all the people going there to learn from them care how they teach, and maybe this person shouldn't be teaching. And I think the whole thing's, I'm benefiting from it, so whatever. But they're making me go into administration because I can talk to people. Which, by the way, I was super awkward. I wasn't cool in high school or anything. A very strange.
You are so socially developed. Like I don't think I cannot imagine you're like awkward
Because of whatever years of hoop jumping, right? Like, yeah, I've jumped so many hoops. I now do administration. It's great.
Well, I mean, everybody is awkward in high school, obviously.
Yeah.
If you're, there is even a correlation, if you are like a super popular in high school, which I was not. I'm just saying I was not awkward, but not super popular. If you're super popular in high school, you usually have problems in adult life because the life doesn't match your expectations. Like you were the best in sports, best in picking up girls, and then the normal life came, and there is so many better people than you, smarter and everything.
By the way, that's my to go to what's wrong with the world and social media and TikTok. I feel so sorry for generations growing up right now, because people are always exposed to the best version or the funniest thing all the time, where I really think local culture is very important. I started there, right? I think it's so important that you're laughing at the funny video your friend made and not whatever happened to be the funniest thing that the algorithm picked. Because I think that's real meaninglessness comes from that, right? If you realize like, oh, my friend just spent an hour making this dumb, stupid video, but I just saw a different video that someone else made and it was funnier, right? That sucks. Like that should never happen. Like I almost feel this stuff is basically it's like a vice, right? It's like you can take drugs and feel good, right? Or
it is because you're releasing dopamine and serotonin by watching.
And so I think it's important that we start to talk about it that way. I'm lucky my kids are young enough to where I think society's going to be caught up a little bit on some of these problems. If new ones don't come, if things stayed similar with social media, I think it will look a lot better in 10 years than it does now, or it has for the last 10 years. But who knows, maybe AI will bring in some other new unexpected brain rot thing that makes people feel meaningless, aside from taking their jobs.
Yeah, well, it is amazing the times we're living in. It's just absolutely, I kind of cursed myself to live in these times, because when I was a kid, I wanted to be like a fighter for independence of Poland against the communist regime.
Wow.
But I was 9 when it fell, so I couldn't do that. At the age of 6, I was reading a book of this size, which is printed like a font 3, which you are supposed to be able to hide it, which said how to survive an interrogation by secret police, right?
Wow.
It's like methods of like standing the pain when you are tortured. So I was like brainwashed into this revolutionary mode. And then the world became like completely calm, no wars, end of history, Fukuyama, the nomination of US. Yeah, sure, there is some war somewhere, but not affecting me. Not anymore. we are getting into very interesting times, I think. We'll see how it untangles, but it's like historically probably the most interesting time ever. Like, do you know any other historical time which would be more interesting? Like,
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Would I still just take a bet that for a day-to-day life, things won't be significantly different for me in a certain amount of time?
I think
I might bet it won't be.
Well, that's the best, right? Everything is interesting around and your life stays unaffected. That's awesome.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I could be wrong, right? I hope I'm not wrong, just because I want to raise my kids into a comfortable thing I know how to operate in. But yeah, that sounds rough. Childhood, though, for you, that's so close to that major historical
Well,
events. I mean, it helps. It helps. I can imagine thinking very differently than what I just said. If in your own history, like, no, like my country and my people just went through this,
well,
but went through stuff.
it was not that bad. I don't want to make it like hero story because it was the end of communists. So communists were not that aggressive. They stopped murdering millions. They were only murdered thousands. Like relax. Like end of revolution. Everybody, no communists believed in their communist ideas there. So it was not rough. It was just the brainwash from family. Because we lost everything. We lost all the land and so on. So we were like raised to hate it. But in practice, it was just not enough food and stuff. But not nobody was arrested even, right? So I'm exaggerating, but I wanted to fight for.
Well, I'm glad you didn't have to fight. That's what I
Now
like. Fighting is
yeah.
bad. No, never.
Well, no, really fight is of course. Well, you know what? This is interesting tangent. So yesterday I talked to Bill, and Bill said something interesting about war. He said that war is what defines men, even though war can never be justified, will never be justified. It's always evil, but it defines transition from boyhood to manhood because it tests you on extreme. And if you don't have it, then it's difficult to grow up. It's very difficult to actually mature fully, not facing these dangers. In traditional societies, there were tests of a passage to the adulthood, which often involves pain, right? You had to go like a 13-year-old boy would need to endure extreme pain and suffering to become an adult. And it was ritualistic, either religious ritualistic. Like I'm talking about traditional societies, like it was important because then he was an adult. And now what we have, like drinking, you can go drinking, right? That means you're adult, or like there is no transition, and that's why everybody stay young, immature longer. But that's okay. That's nice, longer childhood. But then, do you ever mature? Like, how do you mature?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like, what does that mean? So now I'm going to sound all softy, wishy-washy. Like, I think that may have been true historically for a lot of people. Probably not everyone, right? Being defined. I mean, what happened to a lot of people who didn't fight? They didn't become men. What happened to
almost everyone? Like, for example, in Poland, there was no generation ever, except for my parents' generation, so the first one, they're still alive, who didn't experience war ever.
So it's so interesting. So I don't. So let me be clear. No, thank you.
No, nobody wants it.
No. But I'm saying no, thank you on this analysis here. Like I'm very much. I think it's important that people mature. What that means is going to be probably different and change over time. But I've always never identified and felt comfortable with like the traditional masculine stuff I'm supposed to do. Right, which people might consider makes someone a man. And actually, I think our whole society has kind of changed in a lot of ways to, at least, in probably not in lots of the country, but in the circles that I'm in, right, in academia, men have less of that kind of expectation of like tough, push to the extreme.
Yeah, but I mean women too. I mean maturing as a human. I said,
but I don't know if. Oh, sure. We don't need to, and that would be an interesting conversation. But I think maturing is important. I'm hesitant to define it as far as extremes, especially extremes that have to do with violence. And yeah, I think there are different ways we can become mature or wise.
I agree with you. I don't think, well, it would be absolute disaster if human nature required war to mature. But what I agreed with Bill about is that the lack of this kind of specific experiences makes it more difficult for people to be resilient to less extreme situations. So another anecdote, which I think maybe illustrates better than war, because nobody insane mind is.
Of course. And I understand that's not what you meant. But
yeah, I don't mean that. What I mean, it's like there is a book I read and I kind of experience similar thing. There were two guys who were climbing Dhaulagiri. I think it was, and they barely survived that climb. It was extremely difficult, first climb ever of that mountain. And then they go down from the mountain, practically dead. They barely can walk. And then they see a railroad, and they're like, oh my God, we see the railroad in this like snowstorm. So we should go to the railroad because it will lead us. We will not lose the way because it's a railroad. And they walk on the railroad, and then a guard, like a policeman, screams at them, "Hey, why you're walking the railroad? This is illegal." And they present it in the book by saying that it was such a contrast between them surviving this insanity, the near-death experience, and someone criticizing them for walking the railroad, which is not even used, right? And that's what I mean. Like, if you don't have any strong defining experiences, you are unlikely to be resilient for minor issues in your life. That's what I worry. That, for example, I think this is one of the major issues behind the mental health epidemic. If your life is too easy, too long, and you were raised by helicopter parents, which I am guilty of, my children are kind of too protected, then literally anything happens and you're like destroyed, your psyche is destroyed because you never experienced it. So do you think that is true, or it's too naive and we don't need to suffer to grow?
Yeah, well, you mentioned merit earlier, right? And oh gosh, some of these words have become politicized, which is ridiculous. But I think that's important, right? And of course, what does that mean to be good? We've already discussed in this conversation. I think creativity, like choosing something to be good, but having the humility and perhaps the ass kicking, I don't know, from a mentor, is really important. Like I think that can be that. Like it's an impossible problem to write the perfect song or make the perfect game or do whatever. There's no right answer to it. But if you're like, I'm committed to making this thing better, and you don't just think I'm good, I think that can be a form of that, maybe a healthy form of that, maybe a step closer.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was probably lucky later in not as a teenager, but later I did get some mentors who gave me some like that tough talk, right? That made me realize, so then I was finally like humbled and realized that I need to strive and go what it means to be to the next level. So there's something that does that I ascribe to, but I think it's a lot of things that could be that.
So it is not. Yeah. Well, that's a good answer. That's a nice, hopeful answer.
Yeah.
That the element of suffering and struggle is not maybe necessary. It can be replaced by self-improvement through mentorship, through accepting criticism, right?
Yeah, but there's a lot of like I don't want to overstate it, but self-criticism, but I was going to say self-hate. Like I always say, like, you should hate yourself and your project. You should just be like, just like, it's not it, and driven and obsessive about it. I think that's very important. Anything I'm ever proud of, I completely obsessed over and was driven by self-loathing. And then I would say the magic point is when you're done, you suddenly turn into like a narcissist, like an egomaniac. Like, I'm a genius. Like, this is the perfect thing. And so I think getting that pivot is very important too to your own mental health. Yeah, like, man, there's things I've done that I can just sit there and look at forever. And they're for me. I know they're perfect.
I so understand this. Oh my God. So, I make short films, and they're not award-winning films, like they're minor award winnings, but they never got, like, nothing ever got to like top festival and won the award, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I watch them, I think they're masterpieces.
It's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. It's like I can watch it 20 times. It's like I exactly did that the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it talks only to me, apparently, not everybody else, exactly as it should be. It's so much fun, right? So, yeah. And in the process, exactly, it was like, this is stupid. Like, how could I write it?
Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing is there is something to the striving to make everybody else like something, because a lot of pain comes from that too. But man, talk about an impossible problem. Like, it is so hard in creative industries to break through or whatever and get the thing that people think they want. That said, I don't think people do want what they think they want as much as they do.
They are told what they want.
I remember when I was choosing to go into academia professionally, there was the indie game gold rush was going on. And I knew people, a lot of people in my circles were either stopping their job, do independent games. Some of them became millionaires, and the big important games in the Bay Area at the time. And I'm like, should I play this game or should I go this other route and do this like academia thing? So now fast forward 13, whatever, 12, 14 years, whatever it is. I'm like, well, what are these people doing? Like some of them are still rich. Good for them. And other of them are, struggling. They're, what seemed to me like impossible richness because they had some articles written about them and they sold some copies of a game they have nowhere near the freedom that I have as an academic. And it just, so I kind of think I made the right choice, but I guess people, so the thing that people think they want is that attention, right? But even if you get the attention, it goes away, is what I'm trying to say, is it dies down. Mm-hmm. And then you're left with nothing in some cases, right? Like, so
it's very difficult to be famous and then be not famous, right? It's because you got used to this idea that everybody is listening to you and wants to interview you. And I see it among older stars. I know some stars, like celebrities. I don't want to name names, but I see how they struggle with the fact that nobody, like the young generation, doesn't even know who they are. It doesn't, like the person you would know by, would know who they married and so on.
Yeah. It's a smaller scale, but again, in this independent game world, if you went back to 2010 or something, and the names of people who were kind of like they were the vanguard, they were setting the stage for everyone to what was going to be cool. Everyone was writing all these articles about them. They're winning all the awards. The students now, they don't know at all who these people are in any way. They don't even realize that that an indie game revolution happened. Like they don't realize that things looked really different 15 years ago. They have no idea. They're just like,
do you think this is organic? So in this case, it was organic, I think. But do you think fame is organic? Like, do you think that star is a star because they were loved by people, or it's manufactured by studios and purely manufactured?
No, I think a lot of the people that I've known, and again, when I say stars, I don't mean big, I mean, they're sometimes called indie darlings and all this kind of stuff. People who the independent game sphere have loved. Some of them really are truly interesting people. Like it was pretty cool. Also, I find a lot of artists. What's the survivor bias? But a lot of successful people I've seen in the art sphere basically have a commitment and a arrogance about them. And I mean that in a good way. Like they believe something so strongly and they don't have the voice that's telling them that what they're doing is maybe not that important, is quiet. Right. Mm-hmm. And this goes all the way back. I remember the guitar, this guy I knew, I played guitar and I was struggling really hard to learn this hard stuff. And he just learned a couple chords and he was like this cool water polo guy. He wasn't really popular exactly, and then he would just play these songs and he was super cool. It's like maybe like pop his shirt off, take his guitar and sing some songs. And everyone's like, damn it, I can't write a song for the life of me. And I've been playing guitar since I was 6. And he just took 3 chords, man. And anyway, that like arrogance and just like go with it, right? And lack of.
Do you still play guitar?
I do very seldom, but yeah. Oh yeah, it's in me.
Yeah,
I play guitar.
Do you want to like later?
We can play
a little bit.
We can play, yeah,
a little bit, just a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Let's check it out.
Yeah, I'm coming back to guitar. I'm like not that good because I was classical guitar educated.
Oh, wow.
And educated meaning 5 years of lessons, not like conservatory, right? So, but because of the band, I'm like relearning it. And it's so cool, It's like so much fun to play the solos and like
yeah. I haven't been doing like guitar. I've been obsessed with electronic music recently. It's because it massages the computer science mind in me. I get into these weird, like modular synthesizer stuff where these wires are everywhere, and
I know. And I saw your work with VR, right? Like the synthesizers and
The sequencer stuff. Yeah. And so I think there's something really novel. Like I talk about it not being progress oriented. It's like I put up obstructions between me and making music. It's like in order to even try to make music, I need to first learn this esoteric programming language or way of making music. And then, okay, do your best with this weird thing.
Can we put it in the links? Do you have like links to your work?
We can put
in the description. That would be
cool.
Because this, who knows? Maybe the conversation goes viral and you become a famous electronic music artist.
Yes, that's always been the goal. No. I'm done with goals. I'm a parent now. It's their turn.
You're done with
the girl's turn.
parenting?
Yeah.
Well, I had my first kid when I was 26.
Okay,
So
well,
that means I would need to be
done.
No,
I was much later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another coming back to our main topic, games and AI things. This is over-talked topic, but I always ask people because I find it so fascinating. Do you think that the AIs, large language models, will ever be conscious, or they're staying computers? They're not really conscious.
Yeah, I do kind of know what I think about that, I'm pretty sure. And the answer is basically no, or convince enough people to redefine what that means. So, I mean, basically, we already know of a lot of creatures that are conscious and have pain. They're everywhere, right? And we don't care about them. We eat them. Right? And it basically doesn't matter whatever consciousness they have in some ways. Now, that could be a moral failing on our part. And as I'm not a vegetarian, but I do think I'm on the wrong side of history, perhaps, on that one. I think similarly, whatever is going to be happening with AI, my default positions, no, absolutely not. Not conscious in any way whatsoever, not concerned. If any individual human has a relationship with AI and it's their property, I think we should respect that as an issue of property rights. I think that's true.
How about human rights or sentience rights?
Absolutely not. Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
Why not? Like, do you have like a...
Because we don't respect other rights of other living creatures that have the appearance of...
No, but this is a very interesting position. So you are not saying that the AI is not going to be conscious. You are just creating a hierarchy of which consciousness matter. Yes? Or you are saying that the AI will actually not be conscious?
So I don't know. I am probably leaning towards it won't be conscious. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately it comes down to one's regard towards it. So I don't have a feature-based definition of consciousness in that, because it starts to break down. Like we have a hard time talking about what human consciousness is.
Yeah, I know.
We have a hard time talking about consciousness with anything. And we could talk about the, not consciousness, but the being of inanimate objects are in dialogue with the world that they're in. And everything breaks down when you want to break it down. So that's why I kind of go to this, it stops at the human. And it's about how we want to, as a society, regard that thing. I do respect property rights, though. So if you want to act like some machine is important to you, I don't think I should be able to turn it off. That said, unless they're not paying for the electricity.
That's really the first time I hear this position. So usually people position is either that the machines will be conscious because they believe the mind is computational, or like me or Penrose, very small minority of computer scientists say no.
There's some other magic happening, or
whatever. Yeah,
something.
There is like, let's say, quantum element which is not present in universal Turing machines. So you'll not be conscious. The machines will never be conscious, and that's why they don't have sentient rights, because they are actually not conscious. But your position is that you are not answering that question. You are just saying that humans are valuable to humans because we are humans, and therefore you are not granting the rights to something, regardless if it's conscious or not.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's unlikely they're conscious, and if they are conscious, it's very uninteresting to me. What consciousness?
Don't think that consciousness itself, sentience. We should use the word sentience, right? Is itself a value?
No,
Interesting. So if we meet aliens, then we're good. Like we could take over the planet.
Well, I think it's a matter, but this all could change. It's a matter of, I don't think we need to preempt any of these decisions, is what I mean. How about that? It's like if we could be persuaded otherwise. Heck, I know a story. Star Trek Voyager. The Doctor is a hologram. We spend I don't know how many seasons it takes, but basically you start and no one cares about it. But by the end, the Doctor is a real person, right? Is how you're supposed to treat the Doctor. One, I've never been convinced by that. But two, I think something similar. I think like it's going to be a messy process if people are going to start regarding AI as conscious and respecting it, like so they have rights because of their consciousness and they shouldn't suffer, or what would that even mean?
People will do that. They're already developing relationships. So the question because first of all, I don't even believe you exist. I'm a solipsist. So I really appreciate you coming over, but you are a pigment of my imagination. So I'm happy with this conversation with myself. But
that's like Zoom teaching, by the way, was like that during the pandemic. I would just go into a room and yell at a computer for 2 hours.
But I think that even if we presume that you exist and I exist, there is no verifiable test for checking whether this AI is sentient, because it will tell us it is. You just program it to do so, right? It will tell you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
same thing with pain, right? And so part of consciousness and sentience is we don't want things to suffer, right? That's like one of the reasons why you'd care about it. And famously, pain is impossible to talk about, basically, right? Like we all know it, right? But what does that mean? How much pain? And all this kind of stuff. And of course, I'm sure artists have already done this, but it seems like just a no-brainer is to make some LLM that is trying to express that it's in pain to you and trying to trick people. That seems like an obvious thing that people would be doing.
Or even more subtly, don't switch me off. You can totally,
right?
You can totally program it in. Please don't switch me off because you will kill me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a huge risk. There is already a movement. Have you heard about it?
The risk of people caring or
caring? Yes.
Yeah.
There will be a huge portion of society which will fight for sentient rights. This will be like the next generation's calling. They will be.
I don't think so.
I hope you're right.
I don't think
it will be a problem,
especially because the calling of the current generation is still there's going to culture wars are still happening. But yeah, I don't think that culture war is going to happen anytime soon. But yeah, I think I'm on the record. I say no consciousness. I don't care what it says it's doing. Part of this goes all the way back to what interests me about AI. What interests me about AI is basically human mastery over what is trying to be represented. And what do I mean by that is, and this is why I like symbolic methods, which is a thing which I don't know if we have time, but
we do.
I never meant to get into AI. That was never my goal, right? I got into AI because I cared about games. And then I had a great mentor, Michael Matthias, who helped teach me that, if interesting interactive games, you're going to need an interesting system that knows how to deal with non-trivial input and produce surprising and interesting output, which has to be AI. And for many years, that's what AI meant. So historically, AI, the very beginning of AI is like, can we create consciousness in a computer, right? So that's the start of it. But then over time, it started to mean like basic, and it's a mess of a field, but it basically meant large system architectures that do interesting stuff. Right? I don't know, like that is basically how I started to understand AI and see all these like planning systems, like basically search space stuff. And a lot of that was what you call symbolically represented AI. So, and the thing I like about symbolically represented is the symbols are interpretable by humans. And so that's a whole branch of AI that I basically subscribe to. Sometimes I jokingly call it 80s AI, like I'm an 80s AI researcher. The other side of it is machine learning. And the cool thing about symbolic stuff is you can basically read a book, like a big 400-page book on philosophy, and then make formalizations about what that book is saying about what is human experience. Like, oh, cool, I'm going to now model what that thing is trying to tell me. And of course, it'll be a reduction of what's being said in the book. And books aren't written by computer scientists and mathematicians, so they're not really airtight as far as what you're trying to represent. But to me, that's so interesting, right? That's what I find interesting about AI. The other side is machine learning. Machine learning, I always saw it from the very beginning as a formally trained doctorate in AI person as, oh, it's just like fancy statistics, which is cool. I've always inherently had an issue with statistics, right? Because they describe a imaginary person, right? Statistics about people describe our imaginary people. They don't describe individuals, and that's always bothered me. Now, just like statistics, I think machine learning is useful to solve specific problems. So if I'm trying to solve a problem, like I want to search through a library of books and find the right book on a subject. It's like, oh, okay, maybe if we could feed it into the statistics machine, it can help answer that question. I don't consider it to be very interesting, the fact of like searching through or being able to quickly pull out a book in a library. Like I don't find that a very interesting aspect of human experience I'm trying to represent. However, if let's say I'm trying to model how a city evolves over time, like I want the guts, I want the symbolically represented pieces that humans have tried to represent about the way the world works. I want those. If statistics collapses them all into the black box problem, right? If we can't explain really what's happening, it's just kind of how it's tended to happen in the past. And so we get results that might be useful to you. Whereas the other approach is actually, I think, advancing human knowledge in a really interesting way. And that's always what's excited me.
So do you think that machine learning methods never advance human knowledge by themselves? Do you think there is a limit to them, that it is because they are statistical pattern matching? There is an expression, glorified curve fitting, right? Because if you know the basics of regression and the gradient descent, that's basically how it works. It's like trying to fit the curve of impossibly huge spaces, right? Do you think that this is never creating a new knowledge? It's always regeneration in a sense.
So no, I guess it's a distinction that I'm trying to draw. I think machine learning is useful as a tool. So the thing that maybe sounds controversial is I'm saying the way machine learning works, the way the machine works that learned, right, is an interesting algorithm. But that aspect of it is pretty abstract and not interesting. Like it doesn't help, that thing doesn't help us understand. If the results of applying that algorithm help us as a tool somehow, they obviously do. They help me not have to write evaluation of learning outcomes on a course proposal, for instance.
We're the same.
You're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And we write every word of that. Right. So they do help, and it advances, they're helping humans progress. And I think it's very important if you're trying to solve problems. I just have always thought that it's really important, like the actual operation of the machine. Like let's say the machine is to output how adding a road in a city, model of a city, is going to affect traffic, and you need an output. You can have the one that's data driven, and it might be correct, right? Like people spend an average of this amount of time more in traffic. Or you could have the one that is the result of running the giant machine with a bunch of cogs and wheels, everything all working together, and it might be less correct. I still think this is the interesting one, right, to talk about, because this is actually has assertions about reality in it. This just has statements about reality that have been averaged, basically.
And in a sense, this is the reason why machine learning algorithms like the LLMs have hallucinations, and your solution, if verified to be correct, wouldn't, because it would be a reduction of the problem into a computational steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah.
That's an interesting...
And again, let me say, from a game AI point of view, I think this is actually really important. This distinction, I think, is less important in the way a lot of people are talking about AI, which, by the way, doesn't even mean what AI used to mean, because AI means LLMs now. But in game AI, I think it's very important. The whole point is that the player is able to think about the operation of the machine. and interpret the operation of the machine in order to plan and in their brains think about what action they should take to interact with the machine. And they need the interpretability, they need the consistency of the system. It needs to be consistent. They need to have a sense that their action is going to interact with the world, again, consistent, that is going to respect, like the rules of the world aren't changing out from under them, is so important to games. Interesting. The types of games that I'm interested in seeing, like an area of games I think are going to make games more interesting in the future, right? That said, I think other types of AI, for instance, I don't know, texture generation, various graphic stuff, like, yeah, let's throw solutions, like machines that can generate stuff at it if you want. But I want the human in there. The human asserting a lot of complex, nuanced opinions about the thing they're trying to represent.
So because you coming back a little bit to the consciousness problem, so because you don't believe that the machines are conscious, or you don't care, these ideas like the singularity, when we can upload our brain to a computer, is like not happening.
Yeah, man, I wouldn't be the first to do it. I'll tell you what. Like I said, it'd have to be a cultural thing, right? Like that we'd have to learn to accept, right? But yeah. So let's say there's a brain in a computer that's saying it's the person who just uploaded their brain.
Yeah.
Right now, would I pull the plug on that or whatever?
Exactly.
So obviously not, right? But if given a trade-off between a human life and that life, it wouldn't be a second of hesitation right now. Right, like some like trolley problem. You can imagine some. How many uploaded brains?
Oh, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. You know, I asked about it because I'm saying I'm working on a novel, a science fiction novel. I don't have time to do it, but I have the idea. And one of the elements, I won't tell people what it is because it's going to be Nebula and, award-winning novel in the future, I feel.
Excited.
But one element is that this happens like relatively not that far future. And one of the elements is that this is totally normal for people to upload their brains to something called Heaven, which is a virtual reality simulation where when they die, they go to Heaven and they live there whatever simulations they want to. And there is the rebel group which believe that this is fake, and they basically blow up this servers and right. And there is this moral dilemma embedded in it, whether they actually killed some people, or they switch to other computers which are running simulations for another simulation. So that I am leaning to the side that it is basically waste of electricity. It's waste of electricity. You're running a simulation of a brain which is not really conscious to feel, which it doesn't, that it is living in another simulation to live forever.
Yeah.
You can have a conversation with that brain. That's still not real.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, but what does it mean to waste electricity if some human on the other side is talking with someone and enjoying their conversation and willing to pay for it?
That's fine, but these people are living in. So I was not precise. These people are living in heaven for themselves.
Got it.
They could talk to living humans. Like you can consult your grandpa on your problems if you want, but that's valuable for you maybe, but that the whole point is wasting energy on simulating that brains and their experience.
Yeah,
and they never have qualia.
Yeah.
I think we'll be facing these problems.
Do you?
I really think so.
Yeah. I mean, there's already our experiments, of people uploading models of all the chats and all that and talking with dead people. Yeah. I don't know. I think that I'm going to need to see a lot more intermediate steps before I think we're there to worry about the morals of it. I stand behind it. No consciousness, not a problem. I also think there's something weird that I still need to work on articulating. I've said it now like 4 times in a different way. Once you step away from humans making choices and judgments about reality, you lost the point of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's basically all there is to be worrying about.
Yeah. So no transhumanism for you. You're not connecting your brain to your neural link to the newest model of LLM.
Currently, no. And if so, it would be as a human. So then, so yeah, we'll fast forward some years, and I'll think back to this time, and oh no, I'm still a human. I mean, sure, I live in a computer. No.
Well, okay, like I was asking the people who are running this simulation not to switch it off before we finish the conversation. Okay. So hopefully they can waste more energy and not switch it off, you know. And, and anyways, we are inside a computer, right, on a flat screen. This is not 3D, right. This is 2D YouTube video, okay? So
that's true.
Who knows if it was generated in a few years. It could have been generated by generative AI Sora version 7.0, right? So all of these dilemmas are happening. But I seriously worried. One of my biggest worries is this transhumanism movement.
You know, found it?
Because it's one thing. Like, okay, so let's take a neural link. We connect neural link. We have now access to internet and mediated by some really smart AI, and we are claiming we're still human, but we have this access. Well, when I think. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. When I think, and that thought is actually a thought in a model somewhere, and no longer my thought, and I cannot distinguish them, how am I human? Am I human when I'm connected?
Yeah. Well, one, I think my understanding of the technologies were far from any mapping of thought to representation in a computer. And what would that representation be? You're like collapsing into some like vector of what is already a reduction.
Imagine the interface. So I only mean on interface level, not on reality. So I have this neural link connection with internet. And the way I interface with it is I have to think about. So I have to think about the question. What is 2 plus 2? Sure. Now I have in my head, I have answer 4. Now, the 4, not the question, but the answer 4 could have been formulated by my brain or by the LLM calculator. And I don't know which one was it because I'm connected to the LLM and internet over the neural link. And the question is, and that will happen soon, like soon meaning maybe 20 years, not soon meaning 5 years, like with other things, because for example, we can already generate in visual cortex, we can generate images in our imagination, right? So that's going to happen. That's like
not very well though, right? But you think that'll keep getting better?
I think it will get better very soon. But do we want to go there? Like, are we humans when we are like that?
Yeah. Like I said, there is a fundamental skepticism in me on statistical based stuff, and that's all LLMs are. So would you want to give it up? Basically my hunch is no, we wouldn't really want to, but maybe it'd be nice to have some sort of access to it, perhaps, right?
But can you live without it? Like there might be no job for people who don't have Neuralink at all.
Yeah.
Like according to Elon Musk, this is the only way humanity will survive. It's a hybrid with AI, which is a very transhuman view, right? So
under who?
Elon Musk. He thinks that the only way humanity will survive is a hybrid with AI, but that's not humans anymore. I think. I don't know if we are humans. If we are hybrids.
Yeah, I mean, then to pull this move. It's a tool. You're plugging in a tool. Humans are tool users. Like everything is an extension of us already, right? That we're doing.
But there is one intimate thing about us, which is our thoughts. If our thoughts are not our thoughts, because they are generated, I don't know.
Yeah, thoughts not our thoughts because they're generated.
But some thoughts are generated by id, right? Like many thoughts come from subconscious, and you can consider it not you or something. Yeah. That's fine. It's still me. It's still my brain. It's still there. But what about the external?
Yeah.
Then you can have thoughts which and it is not that far-fetched science fiction. That's what I mean. Like, could be a science fiction discussion. Not really. We can, for example, scan brain now and infer images of what people are looking at So we have a mapping between, there's like MRI scan, you are shown a picture of a cat, and you only read the visual context, and you see a picture of a cat. It's blurred, but still picture of a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Of
So
that cat.
I figured out a mapping.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a few years old research. So you can imagine inserting the picture of a cat through this kind of stimulation, or inserting an answer for to that kind of stimulation. Maybe you can protect it somehow, like,
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like the adoption of such a technology would not be quick.
Because of resistance, or because of people?
Resistance and yeah, and I don't think we're in danger of that happening quickly. Right? Like I don't know. Like same
within our lifetime.
I think that'll be the negotiation of it with people will have already dealt with. I'm leaning towards maybe no.
Okay.
It'd take a lot to get that done, to make people comfortable thinking about that.
Yeah, but what if you don't have choice? No job unless you do it.
Because who's the one doing that?
Well, because there is no jobs unless you are an AI, and there is only jobs for AI, and your only option is to merge with AI to have a job. There's one very likely scenario.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if that's true. I don't know.
I just hope it's not true.
Yeah,
maybe I read too much of this, science fiction stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a slight optimist who is not. I don't chase these things, right? Like I don't assume that they're going to be as big as they seem all the time. There've been a few of in my life. This one I'm a little less hesitant on, but what was the first one? Here's the order. Everyone got obsessed with drones. Okay, I didn't bite. Everyone got obsessed with VR. I didn't bite. And again, drones are cool. VR is cool. I'm not like rejecting them. And now it's this machine learning. Like at first, it was basically deep learning. Like everyone went nuts on those breakthroughs, and now we're evolved to another level. I think this one's bigger than the other two. Obviously, that's going to be a much bigger deal. But they don't change the world. Oh, crypto is the other one, right? Everyone got really pumped about crypto. All interesting, all going to affect the world and do affect the world in various ways. But there's definitely a real big hype wagon that like really wants it to be like, nothing's going to be the same. Like tomorrow morning, what are you going to do? And my answer is like, I think I'm in the upper 50% paying attention of people. And as someone in the upper 50%, I think I'll have time to pay attention to how these are going to affect the world.
The great thing about recording it is that we can verify it in 5 years, right?
Yeah, 5
years.
I'll be
so hope if you're right. Oh my God, because I literally had like, I told you, I made this basement myself 2 years ago because I am convinced that potentially with some probability greater than 10% even, then there will be no jobs of professors. So I learned how to do tiling 2 years ago, right? Just in case, because the Optimus robots will come 5 years later.
It'll take a little while longer to get the... Yeah,
this is paranoid view.
Right.
This is paranoid view for sure. But I never had it before. I never believed that we will live in virtual world, or Bitcoin will be the main currency ever and nothing else, or I don't know what was the other. This is the first time I feel like it's not like I'm not prone to paranoia about things.
Yeah, it was.
I am.
It was pretty nice sitting back and being like, I'm a computer science professor. The world's like needs computers. Like I'm good.
It was nice.
And then I don't know. You start. Have you like asked Cursor or one of these ones to like make a game for you right in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
Like
yeah, I use it all the time.
I hadn't done that for like entire games before, and I was like, all right, well, I mean, it was still broken and it required being a programmer to make work, but they can fix that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, crap. Okay, let's see here. What's coming? I still think computer people are going to be. Here's my other optimist point of view. I think you have to be good at working with computers now, right? I think for a long time you didn't have to be good at working with computers in order to get paid a livable, whatever that means, job. And I think as educators, this is something that I'm working on in my department, is I think we've been way too lax for way too long. And I'm not a hard nose. I think we've just been way too lax about it. And it's like, if you want a job, which most students do, that's what most students are paying attention for and paying for. We got to raise standards and make it so when you're a computer person, you can't be replaced by one computer person is going to be doing what 20 people can do, right? And so you want to be that one computer person working 20 times as much, right? Yeah.
Hopefully, for a while, it will stay like this. I think it will eventually disappear of being even good. But you know that this year even there is a expectation on Microsoft, I think, someone announced that they will be firing a lot of junior software developers because AI is good enough. So, yes.
Which makes sense. So, like, if you think about it, I remember when I first started being a professor, the department is very small, the computer science department. And we're now very large for the university, but I was always shocked. I was not a super genius computer science undergrad. I became smart later. That's always my line. I became smart in grad school. And I'm like, these people are not really, they're basically where I was or below, some of them, and they get jobs. Oh my God. And I worry that that kind of person isn't going to be getting jobs, right? Right. The junior programmer who has a lot to learn still, right? Yeah. I think another thing is, I think I know where you land on this. I think it's important I think it's very important that we have people not deny that the tools exist currently, because that's basically going to be what it involves. And at the same time, I think the thing that differentiates any old person from using a tool from someone who is probably going to stay valuable for a while is if they understand what they're looking at. Well, where do you get that unless you focus on the basics? So this problem's in computer science. It's also in essay writing, right? Where if you don't know how to write a paragraph, you can only generate a paragraph. How are you going to assess your paragraph? It's like a circular problem. I don't know exactly what to do with that in computer science as a discipline. My current answer is to hold the line on tradition. But in all of these other fields that use a little bit of computers, I'm starting to think like, let's not, and I think you've said this to me before too, like, let's maybe not try as hard to teach them the fundamentals, because I think they're going to get a lot further if you don't have a computer science background and you're taking a game design degree. You're going to probably make better games if you just deal with prompts already. And I'm fast forward a couple of years and this will for sure be true. But if you just focus on like writing good prompts and trying to generate, you're going to make better prototypes than if you're struggling going from the ground up in like a semester or 2 semesters.
I am kind of changing my mind on it.
Are you?
You know, and the reason is that I did use for the first time code generation in class in teaching development. And I noticed exactly what you just said. What I noticed is that for me, as a very experienced software engineer, I would say, like 30 years of programming, it's super useful tool, despite making stupid mistakes, because I don't need to remember the function names, check the new API, know which Express.js module to insert. I don't care. I know how it works. I just want it to be generated. Yeah, that absolutely doesn't work when you're learning.
That's what I told you when
you told me that. Yes.
Yeah. But then I don't know. I played with Cursor the other night, and I was like, so I have this assignment where we're basically trying to focus on simple game mechanics and just making them good. That's the whole point of my current class. Is like, enough about tech learning. Let's make something actually good. And so that we talked about that, good and bad. So I've been leaning on that a lot this semester. And I just asked it questions, kind of like a game designer. So like if I spent the time, and out came on the first try what I asked it to. I was like, well, crap. That was like from scratch, right? Like nothing. It wasn't like a part of a game. It was an entire single screen game. But as someone who spent years making game generators that were single screen games, I was kind of shaken by it a little bit. I was like, interesting. And it didn't just recreate Pong, right? It was like a novel thing I asked it to do. I was like, relatively novel. I mean, it was still shapes colliding with each other with physics, but it wasn't just a rehash of Pong or something.
I tried it with DeepSeek. So I downloaded DeepSeek and installed it on my computer. I heard that now it will be maybe illegal. Have you heard this? That they're thinking about like making DeepSeek illegal.
And there's some sort of cybersecurity aspect of that.
Yeah, but so
They get ending info or something.
what they are when you're running the model in internet, but I don't know how you can even program a model itself weights which are you are loading to send an info, because it's like it's weights, it's values, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know enough about the security of PKL files in PKL, pickles files in Python. I will need to check that. But I asked it to generate a game, and the cool thing about this model is that it shows you the process of thinking. I mean, you can get it in other models, but they're rougher.
You mean the reasoning?
The reasoning.
The reasoning is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It shows you very exactly, very step-by-step way of reasoning that out, that code, and it is scarily impressive, very impressive.
Mm-hmm. It is. I just recently started playing around with some of that reasoning stuff. And my current project, by the way, is using LLMs to generate dialogue, but at the very last step of a strongly complex, symbolically based simulation. So the idea is the player and the characters find themselves in a symbolically state represented, very complex situation. And from personal experience, a human can't write all the dialogue for all these situations. So usually what you end up doing is you write bad general dialogue to cover many situations. That's the solution in normal game narrative. And then the experiment here, which works, it's like, is to make some massive prompt that's, like from the ceiling down of just state information, basically pleading with the LLM to write a line of dialogue for a very specific case. Outcomes, like 90-something% of the time, like great dialogue that is better than the human authored dialogue that respects the fact that we're coworkers, but you were just flirting with somebody on the clock, but you're also on break, and all this complicated state information.
This is brilliant. So this is extension. Maybe you should speak about it a little bit. The extension of your like kind of even life's work, I would say, like the major project.
Isn't that weird?
The social generation, the emergent generation of social behavior from simple rules, right? Or symbolic rules, not necessarily simple.
Yeah, well, it comes down to being fairly simple, but then it's the interaction between a lot of them that creates complex emergent behavior.
So how does it work? I know how it works. I'm asking for the people. But
so basically social simulation work in AI language, to make it sound simple, is an action selection, like a character action selection mechanism based on a utility function. But the utility function is the result of evaluating a large set of weighted rules. So if a rule is true, it contributes to the utility to take an action. Right? Does that basically make sense? So that's if I wanted to look at it from a narrow, like what's the AI point of view, but it's a big old system, right? That does that on a big scale. So the idea is that characters can initiate a small talk conversation. So say Krzysztof and I are going to be in a small talk conversation. I can have an intent to be kind or to be rude or to impress you or to flirt with you, or these are all these possible intents I could have, which might flavor the way I initiate small talk with you. The reason why I might have any of those intents are determined by a large set of these rules that determine why people might be kind, want to impress, want to flirt, etc., want to be rude. So for instance, if I just had a kind of workplace example, if I'm not an employee at a restaurant, you are an employee at a restaurant, and you're on break. So you're like on break, I'm just some guy at the restaurant, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? You might be like, buzz off. You might be like, a little piece of you might be like, leave me alone, right? Like I'm on break right now. Okay. So there's a notion, just one human concept that we all kind of could relate. That sounds plausible, right? That might be a feeling you might have, right? Okay. So that's something nudging you in that direction. But let's say we're also family members. That's a separate consideration. It's like, I'm your cousin. So now you're going to be a little less likely to be rude to your cousin, right? And then let's say, but you're also a cousin who has flirted with my wife recently, right? And I happen to know also that you're very attracted to my wife. And now I'm like, dude, I definitely want to be rude in my small talk. So I might come up and give a passive. So there's an example, like 3 things that might be true. Previous work had thousands of these. Our current work has hundreds of these things that influence basically social common sense. So that's a traditional AI problem also, is common sense reasoning. That becomes actually the hard part of AI. It's not given the nuanced response, but the floor of common sense. So we have humans author all the common sense in these little bite-sized rules. And then we have our system architecture that's able to account for a lot of them. Then we feed it into a nice big prompt, which out comes a nice line of dialogue that represents that nuanced situation. Last thing I'll say is, I just gave an example of like the initiating bit of small talk, like the first line, but these things are like, they look like branching dialogue trees, but every branch isn't just like a hard thing. So like, say I'm rude to you, your response isn't going to be a response to someone being rude at you. Your response is going to be, well, you're an employee and I'm not. You have a crush on my wife. All these things that are from your perspective. Maybe you're maybe 4 different people have been rude to you recently, so you feel picked on. All these things are now going to inform how you respond, and all this might make you want to just be kind, right, to me in response. So anyway, this branching stuff, and so you end up having this like what we call social practice, which is the generalization of all ways people might have small talk, which that level structure isn't really that complicated, but the reasons why you would navigate through that structure is very complicated.
And that creates the emergence in the system,
Of
behaviors.
We had a lot of data on an old piece of work that we managed that, like within 2 moves, like out of lots of players, no one's state was the same, basically, right? Like it just diverges immediately between once 2 people interact because there's so much state.
Are the graphs weighted, or is there probability on the branching?
No, full determinism in this work. Even when things are tied, we stick with determinist, pick the first one.
So it's in a sense, it's a chaotic system, would you say? From the perspective of chaos theory? Yeah, right? Because you have determinism at the bottom, because it's a classical, chaotic system is a classical, not quantum, right? But yet you're getting such a diverge behavior. Cool. That's really cool. I knew about your work, but this is more clarifying. I have a little controversial question there.
Sure.
So you use the LLMs for that, and depending on the behavior, are you always getting good dialogue lines, or for some behaviors we're getting bad? What I mean is that LLMs currently are really brainwashed. You cannot make them do things like behave rudely, right? It's very difficult. They pretend to be rude. They will be like, I don't like you, or something like that. That's the worst rudeness you can get from that. Did you notice that, or you have no?
Not very much. So you have to convince it that it's writing a line of dialogue for something like a play or a sitcom. Like you have that kind of prompt engineering strategy in there.
I tried it. It's still, I made like a controversial prompt. I said like, okay, you're in a situation when I wanted it to generate a film script, right? So one of the characters is a racist in the film script, and I want these dialogue lines to be super racist.
Oh yeah.
It was first it refused to do it, and then it was actually saying that the racist thing it was saying was ridiculous. Like it was like nice racist. It was just unreadable. Like so you can't do it, right? So you cannot go to.
So we're not go. Yeah,
and that makes it very useless in some applications, like novel writing. Like I want help with my novel.
But don't you think? That's just because we're using the off-the-shelf stuff, right? I imagine you could want to get something locally running that will.
If it was brainwashed, I don't want to call this brainwash. So they use the reinforcement learning with human feedback to mold the model into not rude model, right? Like which is necessary, because if you got the raw version, it would be absolutely useless. It would like swear all the time and so on, right? But we don't have access to these rude models, raw models, and what we get is already biased toward niceness and being civilized, and
that's basically fine for our application.
But creative applications, no. Like writing a film script.
Yeah.
That's good news, actually. You cannot write a novel with when
That'll
everybody's
probably
nice
change
in
that.
it.
Over time, I bet you that these models, that's something that's just going to change over time, right? Like they'll have more access to more. I mean, even the last couple of years, you have more access than ever. It's easier than ever too. The tool chains are easier. We're not running local, but I was just looking into it. Like 2 years ago, I looked into it, and now I've looked into it again this week, and like, oh, I could do that. Like, I could install that thing locally and do it.
But you cannot modify it that much, right? You
No,
get a version with reinforcement learning on top of it.
Yeah, I know. Can you on these like private GPT and all this?
I don't think I can.
Can you? Probably not. Because I'm sure they wouldn't want their product to be associated with.
Yeah, well,
people would do.
the good example is DeepSeek, right? If you ask DeepSeek a question online, which you shouldn't, by the way, because everything is registered by Chinese Communist Party. So don't give them any information, even your date of birth or something, right? But if you ask a question about Tibet, I asked about Tibet, you know, it will refuse to answer. Tiananmen Square, it will refuse to answer.
Wow.
But then you download the model and you ask a question about Tibet, and it will still refuse to answer, right? It's you get the brainwashed model. So that's worrying because that happens everywhere, right? So if the models in the future are really the objective source of knowledge, then whatever way they are biased will be the objective source of knowledge everybody accepts as true. It's extremely worrying.
Yeah.
As opposed to Googling internet and finding 90% of BS false information and 5%.
Yeah, but isn't that crazy how even the Google, though, right before this happened, Google was becoming borderline uninteresting, right? Like it used to be indexed on, they got so sanitized over the years. Like I didn't notice actually. Like one day I just woke up and like, wait, you used to just get like forum posts when you Googled. You used to get like anything would just appear when you Googled, and now it's like no, you just get this nice filtered first page of.
Yeah, it's definitely happening. That's true, and that's very bad because you know I am free speech absolutist for a simple reason that there should be that these dumbest ideas should be presented so you can laugh them out and kill them with arguments. When they're not presented, then they become little conspiracy theories who people quietly believe in and then never speak about it because it's forbidden to speak about them. It's a huge mistake. And Google became a little bit like this.
I'm always surprised, about free speech absolutism, maybe as someone who people own these companies. So once government gets involved, I'm against that. But non-governmental self-regulation or whatever, like I'm all for it.
Oh yeah. I'm in government.
Okay, yeah.
No, of course. Like Google, like if I have a website, I don't want like some racist stuff on it because I decide, not you.
Yeah.
Like,
or if someone is promoting that indirectly, then we shun them. Or like, no, we don't like you promoting this racist stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but it depends. It really depends because if I am the only website for it, that becomes a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like if I am one of many, so then that's fine. I can decide. But if I am a monopoly, then I don't know. Then it has to be treated like AT&T. Whatever you say over the phone, it's not the responsibility of AT&T.
Oh yeah, sure.
Right, like this approach.
Yeah.
So I think we went through a lot of stuff.
Yes,
that was interesting. Cool. A circle coming back to AI from education. I have the last question. Is there anything you think which you are completely missing right now? Like nobody pays attention, and it's like it can be in science, it can be in your research, something which you think is interesting and people are like not, paying attention or don't know. Or another form of this question, this is tough because it's like putting you on a spot, right? Another question which I asked Nathan, is there something in your field which you as a young scientist, young computer scientist or game designer would be like so excited, like work on this, do that. What do you think? Is there something like this?
I was picking one. So let's see. I still think there is so much opportunity in game design for experimentation It's not even funny. And I think there's a couple things that people, if they could just accept it, they would have an easier time getting careers, or even in industry. And it's the problem is people. So one, you need to stop thinking about recreating the game that you already love. It's probably already been done. Like I said, the best snowboarding games came out in the early 2000s. No, the skateboarding games, they're done. No, I'm not saying you can't do that. That can be a part of your game. But I really think there's this thing that we've called like AI-based game design. I have to rename it now that AI necessarily means LLM, but I've declared defeat, by the way. I removed AI from my bio even because I was so just like, I don't want to talk about, I don't want people thinking that's what I'm doing. Pick something that you care about in the world, try to model it in non-trivial ways, and then try to make a game out of it. Like that right there is a recipe for making an interesting experiment in games that I know for sure people want to talk about. Like people who actually care about game design. And no one does that. Like very few people do that, right? People instead think about, I want to make a game. They think about their story of their game. So then now they're making branching dialogue, right? Like, and right. So that's so many games boil down to that because they're starting at the story they want to make, or like, I like first person shooters. So they make just a remake of something. But I really think like name a subject. I don't know, get the Communist Manifesto out, read it, start identifying things that are talked about in there, right? And start thinking like someone doing software engineering project, like UML basically, right? Boxes and arrows, and start to think like, well, what's being said here, right? And make huge reductions probably of what's being said, right? Because you have to necessarily, right? Because human language isn't airtight like thing. And start writing your data structures and get them to interact with each other and start answering the question, okay, now what's the player do? And get them in there and then keep working on it for probably a few years. Because it's really hard to make a good game, but you're going to end up with something that just automatically, just right off, as long as you hold yourself to a higher standard of polish and playability and care about UX and stuff, you're already at the top 10% of people trying to make it in games.
That's a very cool advice for young game designers.
Basically never met anyone who does this.
Well, maybe, again.
And then I got caught at being a professor, so I had to stop. But that was like basically how my whole spiel was, right?
We're spreading the word, so maybe now somebody in the audience will do that. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. It was a pleasure. It was cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really great talking.
Thank you.